Late afternoon in Quantico, Virginia, carried the chill of autumn. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the large windows of Liberty Diner, a cozy eatery tucked away on the main road leading to Marine Corps Base. The atmosphere inside was warm, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and toasted bread, mingling with the clatter of dishes and the light chatter of patrons. This was a place where locals, from veterans to military families, gathered after a long day. But today, no one could have guessed that Liberty Diner would become the starting point for a much larger story. Lydia Harper sat alone in the corner of the cafe, at the small table by the window that she always chose, just enough to observe everything without being noticed. At 35, Lydia had a sturdy build, neatly cropped brown hair, and deep blue eyes that held an unusual calmness. On her worn denim jacket, a tiny purple heart pin sparkled in the light, the only sign hinting at her past of 3 tours in Iraq with the Marine Corps Force Recon. But now, she no longer wore a uniform. Lydia was just an ordinary woman, or at least she wanted everyone to think so. She took a sip of black coffee, the drink she had grown accustomed to during those long days marching through the dusty desert. Today was a rare, peaceful day. Work at the VA Veterans Center in Quantico had just made some progress. 3 veterans had signed up for computer training, a small step for them to regain their footing in civilian life. Lydia smiled softly, a sense of satisfaction creeping into her heart. She didn't like talking about herself, didn't share stories of days spent with a gun or sleepless nights under the sound of bombs. For her, the past was the past, and she wanted to keep it that way. "Lydia, would you like some more coffee, honey?" The warm voice of Mrs. Martha broke through her thoughts. Martha, a veteran waitress who had worked at Liberty Diner for over 20 years, approached with a coffee pot in hand. At 60 years old, she was still spry, her eyes sparkling with the humor of someone who had seen it all in this town. "Thank you, Martha," Lydia replied, pushing the white porcelain cup forward. "How's your day going?" "Just like any other day," Martha said as she poured the coffee. "The old guys at that table are still arguing about last night's game, and a young girl at the counter is telling the story of how her boyfriend just dumped her. How about you? How's the center doing?" "There are 3 new people starting today," Lydia replied, her voice steady. "They're slowly finding themselves again. It feels really good." Martha nodded, her eyes glimmering with a hint of pride. "You've done really well, Lydia. But honestly, I still can't believe you were a Marine Corps captain. 3 tours of duty, no less. Why haven't you told me about this all these years?" Lydia chuckled softly and shrugged. "Some things are better left unsaid, Martha. That part of my life is behind me now." Martha shook her head, as if she disagreed but still respected Lydia's privacy. She set the coffee pot down on the table and gently patted her shoulder. "You're a mystery, Lydia Harper, but I like that. Take care of yourself. There are many people who need you." As Martha turned back to the counter, Lydia gazed out the window. Military trucks occasionally rumbled by, their engines emitting a familiar roar. Quantico wasn't a big town, but it had the spirit of those who had served, who had sacrificed, and who were now trying to rebuild their lives. She loved this place, not just because it was close to her old base, but also because it was where she found peace after years of chaos. But that peace didn't last long. The doorbell rang, not the gentle sound of family coming home, but a loud, jarring chime, as if someone was deliberately slamming the door. Lydia didn't turn around right away, but her instincts honed through countless battles immediately kicked in. She glanced at the reflection in the glass, and what she saw made her heart race a little faster. 5 men walked in, wearing shiny black leather jackets, each sporting the Iron Reapers emblem, a notorious motorcycle gang in Virginia. They weren't your average bikers. The Iron Reapers were infamous for their rowdy behavior, bar fights, and even whispers of illegal dealings. The leader, a tall guy named Jay stitched onto his jacket, had an aggressive stride, his cold, sharp eyes scanning the bar like a predator on the hunt. He stood about 6'2", weighed around 240 pounds, with muscles rippling beneath his leather. Behind him were 4 others, each wearing a look that was anything but friendly. Well, Jace's voice rang out, deep and teasing, cutting to the chatter in the bar. "Looks like we just found ourselves an interesting spot to take a break, brothers." Lydia held her position, coffee cup still in hand, but her mind had shifted into fight mode. She silently assessed. The second guy, a scrawny dude with a snake tattoo slithering up his neck, kept his right hand close to his jacket pocket, possibly hiding a knife or a gun. The other three spread out, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor, creating a menacing sound. The atmosphere in Liberty Diner suddenly became stifling, as if a storm was brewing. Martha, standing behind the counter, gripped the dishcloth tightly in her hand. A young mother with two small children at a nearby table began to pack up her things, trying not to draw attention. But Jace had seen her. He smirked and walked over to their table. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Afraid we're ruining your kids' dinner." Lydia set her coffee cup down, gently but firmly. She knew this wouldn't stop at just a few teasing remarks. The Iron Reapers weren't here to eat bread or sip coffee. They were here to assert their power, to spread fear. And she, whether she liked it or not, knew she couldn't just sit back and watch it happen. "Let them go." Lydia's voice rang out, calm yet sharp, slicing through the tense atmosphere like a knife. Her head tilted slightly. Her eyes locked onto Jace through the reflective glass. "They have nothing to do with you." Jace turned around slowly, his eyes narrowing as if he had just found a new toy. "Oh, look who's speaking up," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. A brave girl in the corner of the bar. "Who do you think you are, giving me orders?" Lydia didn't answer right away. She stood up, calmly pulled out a chair, her hands resting loosely at her sides. But anyone who had ever seen her in a fight knew that calmness was a sign of a storm about to break. The atmosphere in Liberty Diner was heavy, like the sky before a storm. Jace's mocking laughter echoed, drawing curious and worried glances from the patrons. He walked slowly toward Lydia, his leather boots thudding against the wooden floor, creating a menacing rhythm. Behind him, for other Iron Reapers began to spread out, like a pack of wolves getting ready to surround their prey. But Lydia Harper was no prey, and she knew that better than anyone. Jace stopped about 5 feet away from Lydia, close enough for her to catch the scent of worn leather mixed with cigarette smoke from his jacket. He towered over her by a whole head, but Lydia didn't flinch. She stood there, her shoulders relaxed, hands hanging loosely at her sides, yet her deep blue eyes were locked onto him, sharp as a dagger. For a brief moment, Jace hesitated. There was something in the way Lydia stood, the way she looked at him, that set off alarm bells in his instincts. But he quickly masked that with a smirk. "What's up, sis?" Jace said, his voice low but teasing. "You think you can hang with the Iron Reapers? Or are you just some kid trying to show off?" Lydia didn't answer right away. She glanced at the window, using it like a mirror to observe the whole group. The skinny guy with the snake tattoo on his neck, whom she temporarily named Snake, kept his right hand close to his jacket pocket, his thumb hooked into his belt, ready to draw a weapon at any moment. 2 other guys had taken over the exit, blocking the main door with their massive bodies. The 4th guy, a short-haired dude with a huge silver ring on his hand, approached the counter where Martha was standing. He deliberately knocked a glass of water to the floor, the sound of shattering glass ringing out sharply. "Oh, man, so clumsy." The silver-haired guy laughed loudly, turning to the young waitress behind the counter, a girl about 20 named Jenny. "Get a move on, sweetheart. Don't keep me waiting too long." Jenny trembled, her hands gripping the tray of food so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She bent down to pick up the shards, trying her best not to look directly at the guy. Across the diner, a young mother with 2 kids started to move faster, pulling her little one toward the door. But Snake quickly stepped in, blocking their way. "Where are you rushing off to?" he said, his voice slick and menacing. "The fun hasn't even started yet." "Enough already." Lydia's voice rang out again, this time stronger, cutting through the noise in the bar like a gunshot. She took a step toward Jace, closing the distance between them to just 3 feet. "I told you to leave them alone. This isn't a place for you troublemakers." Jace laughed, but the sound couldn't hide the flicker of unease in his eyes. "Who do you think you are, huh?" he shouted, raising his voice to drown out his own doubts. "The sheriff? Or just some girl trying to play the hero?" Lydia tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving him. I'm someone who's learned how to deal with guys like you in places way worse than this dive, she said, her voice steady but as cold as steel. 3 tours in Iraq with the Marine Corps taught me a thing or two about keeping order. Now step back and let them through. Jace's laughter suddenly stopped. He stared at her, trying to figure out if she was lying. A Marine? 3 tours? For a player like Jace, that sounded like cheap bragging. But there was something about the way Lydia stood there, completely unshaken, without a hint of fear, that he couldn't ignore. He glanced at Snake, giving a slight nod. Snake stepped forward, his right hand now drawing a dagger, the steel blade glinting under the fluorescent lights of the bar. Marine Corps, huh? Snake scoffed, twirling the knife in his hand. I want to see what you can do with this, little sister. The atmosphere in Liberty Diner has thickened. Martha steps back from the counter, gripping the phone tightly, perhaps contemplating calling the police. Jenny stands frozen, tears welling up in her eyes. The young mother clings tightly to her 2 children, trying to shield them from the unfolding scene. But Lydia remains unfazed. She shifts her weight to her left leg, a subtle movement almost unnoticed by anyone. But for anyone trained in combat, it's a clear sign that she's ready to act. Put the knife away, Lydia said, her voice dropping to a chilling threat. You don't want this to get any worse. Snake laughed loudly, but that laugh didn't reach his eyes. He lunged forward, his knife slicing through the air in a sharp arc aimed directly at Lydia's shoulder. His movement was quick, but it lacked finesse and amateurish attack compared to what Lydia had faced before. She leaned to the right, as swift as a shadow, allowing the blade to zip past her shoulder by less than 2 inches. Before Snake could react, Lydia seized his wrist, twisting it sharply in the opposite direction. A dry crack echoed as his joint dislocated, the knife clattering to the floor, spinning like a coin. Snake screamed, clutching his arm, collapsing against a nearby table, knocking over a plate of fries and a cup of water. Jay stood frozen, his eyes wide. He never expected this, none of the Iron Reapers did. Lydia turned to face Jace, her breath steady, showing no signs of disturbance. 1, she said, her voice calm as if she were just counting a sheep in the flock. 4 more. Who wants to give a shot next? Jace clenched his fist, his knuckles turning white. He glanced over at Snake writhing on the floor, then turned back to Lydia. You're going to regret this, he growled, his right hand reaching into his jacket, where something glinted under the light, probably a pair of brass knuckles. No one messes with the Iron Reapers and gets away with it. Lydia smiled, a small but icy smile. I've heard that before, she said, usually from those who don't know who they're up against. The tension in the cafe had reached a boiling point. Customers huddled together, some discreetly pulling out their phones to record. Martha had vanished behind the counter, likely calling 911. But Lydia knew that with the response time of the Quantico police, it would take at least 5 minutes for the first patrol car to arrive. 5 minutes was far too long in a situation like this, and she wasn't about to wait. The sound of Snake's groans blended with the suffocating silence in Liberty Diner. His dagger lay abandoned on the wooden floor, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the steel blade like a forgotten warning. Jay stood there, his eyes narrowed, his right hand still gripping the brass knuckles that peeked out from beneath his leather jacket. He wasn't smiling anymore. The atmosphere in the diner felt like a taut guitar string, just waiting for a tug to snap. Lydia Harper stood firm in the eye of the storm, her breathing steady, her hands relaxed at her sides as if she had just finished a light warm-up. But in her mind, everything was operating at the speed of a combat machine trained through 3 tours in Iraq. She calculated quickly. Snake was down for left. Jace was the biggest threat, massive, aggressive, and clearly not used to being challenged. The silver ring guy at the counter was turning back, his hands clenched as if ready to spring. The 2 blocking the door remained still, but their eyes flickered between Jace and her, waiting for a command. All right then, Jace roared, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and anxiety. You think taking down one guy is the end of it? I'll show you that messing with the Iron Reapers is the biggest mistake of your life. He pulled out his brass knuckles, the metal glinting as he raised his hand, ready to throw a punch. Let's go, brothers. Take her down. The silver ring guy lunged in from the left, throwing a clumsy punch aimed straight at Lydia's head. but she saw it coming. With a smooth motion like water flowing, she leaned to the right, letting the punch barely graze her face by less than an inch. Before he could pull his hand back, Lydia spun around and slammed her elbow hard into his temple. A sharp thud echoed as the silver ring guy crashed to the floor, his head hitting the edge of the table, knocking another plate of sandwiches to the ground. 2, Lydia said, her voice calm, as if she were counting the dominoes falling down. She turned to face Jace, without a hint of hesitation. Jace roared like a cornered beast. He charged forward, his iron fist swinging in a wide arc, aimed straight at Lydia's chest. His blow was powerful, but too slow compared to what she had faced in the trenches of Fallujah. Lydia ducked low, letting his punch sail over her head, feeling the rush of wind from his strength. In an instant, she delivered a low kick, sweeping her right leg into Jace's left knee. He lost his balance, his 240-pound frame crashing to the floor like a tree being felled, shaking the window frames of Liberty Diner. Jace screamed, trying to push himself up, blood oozing from the corner of his mouth where he bit his tongue when he fell. You will pay for this, he hissed through clenched teeth, but his voice had lost the confidence it once had. Lydia stepped forward, standing 2 feet away from him, looking down with a cold gaze but no malice. I told you, she said. 3 times in Iraq taught me how to deal with guys like you, but I'm not here to brag. Now get up, take your friend, and leave these people alone. The other 2 guys, the ones blocking the door, exchanged glances, then looked at Jace writhing on the floor. One of them, a tall, lanky guy with greasy hair, stepped back and raised his hands as if to surrender. I'm not fighting you, he mumbled, his voice trembling. I'm not stupid enough to mess with the Marines. Smart move. Lydia nodded, her gaze still locked on Jace. What about you? Do you want to keep going or stop here? Jace gasped for breath, bracing himself on the floor, but he couldn't get up right away. He looked at her, his eyes a mix of anger and confusion. Who are you, really? He asked, his voice hoarse from pain and shock. I am the protector of the innocent, Lydia replied, her voice soft yet resolute. 15 years in the Marine Corps don't just vanish because I've taken off my uniform. Now get up, or I'll help you stand in a way you won't like. The sound of the police siren began to echo from afar, about half a mile from Liberty Diner. Martha must have called 911 the moment Snake pulled out the knife, and now the patrol car was racing toward them. But Lydia didn't need the police to end this. She had already done herself, with her own hands, with the calmness and strength she had carried from her days of fighting. Jay slowly sat up, hugging his knees, his gaze still fixed on Lydia. He didn't say anything more, but the aggression in his eyes had given way to something else, respect, or perhaps fear. Snake and the silver ring guy were helped up by their friends, and the whole group staggered back toward the door. The patrons in the diner, from the young mother to the waitress Jenny, looked at Lydia with a mix of astonishment and gratitude. Thank you, the young mother whispered, tightly hugging her 2 children as they stepped outside. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here. It's okay, Lydia replied softly. As long as they're safe, that's what matters. As the Iron Reapers withdrew, leaving behind a floor littered with debris and a brief chaos, Liberty Diner slowly began to catch its breath. Martha stepped out from behind the counter, still holding the phone, and looked at Lydia with eyes full of admiration. Are you okay, Lydia? She asked. All right, Martha, Lydia said, settling back at her desk as if nothing had happened. She picked up her coffee cup, but it was already cold. But maybe I need a fresh cup. Martha laughed heartily, her laughter breaking the remaining tension. Consider on the house, honey. After that performance, you deserve a whole jar. But when Lydia looked out the window, where the shadows of the Iron Reapers faded into the darkness, she knew this wasn't over. Jace wouldn't forget her, and she wouldn't forget him. This was just the beginning of beginnings she never wanted, but was ready to face. The darkness settled over Liberty Diner as the last patrol cars pulled away from the parking lot, their red and blue lights gradually fading into the night of Quantico, Virginia. The distant wail of police sirens faded away, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Inside the diner, patrons began to rise, whispering to one another about what had just happened to the woman who had taken down 3 Iron Reapers without breaking a sweat. But Lydia Harper, the center of everyone's attention, simply sat quietly in her seat, cradling a fresh cup of coffee that Martha had just brought over, as if the confrontation had been nothing more than a passing breeze. Martha stood behind the counter, hands on her hips, looking at Lydia with a mix of curiosity and admiration. "You're quite a whirlwind, Lydia Harper," she said, her voice warm but unable to hide her astonishment. "I've never seen anyone handle that bunch of troublemakers so quickly. Are you really okay?" Lydia took a sip of her coffee, the steam rising from the cup, relaxing her a bit. "I'm fine, Martha," she replied, her voice steady. "It's just a minor issue. They picked the wrong day to stir things up, that's all." "Small matter." Martha laughed, shaking her head. "Honey, you just gave Jason those Iron Reapers a lesson that Quantico will be talking about for a long time. But," she hesitated, lowering her voice, "tell me the truth. How could someone as quiet and humble as you pull that off?" Lydia smiled softly, a smile that didn't reveal too much. "I've been trained well, Martha. That's all." She didn't want to say more, didn't want to dig up the memories she had tried to bury since leaving the U.S. Marine Corps. But Martha's gaze, filled with genuine curiosity, made it hard for her not to reflect on those days. At 35, Lydia Harper isn't the kind of person you'd expect when you think of a former Force Recon captain. She's not tall, standing at about 5'6", and her athletic build is often hidden beneath oversized denim jackets. Her neatly cropped brown hair and calm, deep blue eyes give nothing away about her past as a warrior. But the tiny purple heart badge on her jacket, a keepsake from her days in Iraq, is the only trace she allows the world to see. It's not just a medal. It's proof of the scars she carries inside, scars that no one at Quantico ever knew about. Lydia's life now revolves around simple, everyday moments. She works at the VA Veterans Center in Quantico, just 2 miles east of Liberty Diner. Her job is to help those who have served, like herself, find their footing in the civilian world, from teaching them how to write resumes to supporting them through the nightmares of war. Today, she just wrapped up a training session with 3 new veterans, all of whom had served in Afghanistan, and their shy smiles upon completing their first computer lesson were the greatest reward she could hope for. "Lydia, are you sure you don't need to check anything?" Martha asked again, pulling her back to reality. "I mean, you just took down 3 guys twice your size." "I'm fine," Lydia replied, setting her coffee cup down on the table. "But thank you for worrying. I just want everyone here to be at peace." Martha nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on Lydia. "You know, I've always thought of you as someone special, but today, I'm finally seeing who you really are. A quiet hero, isn't that right?" Lydia shrugged, brushing off the compliment. "I'm not a hero, Martha. I'm just doing what needs to be done." But deep down, she knew the truth was more complicated than that. 15 years in the Marine Corps, with 3 tours in Iraq, had forged her into something beyond an ordinary woman. Force Recon, the elite unit of the Marines, not only taught her how to fight, but also how to survive, how to protect, and how to stay calm when everything around her was falling apart. She recalled her early days in Iraq, when she was just a 20-year-old lieutenant, leading a reconnaissance team to the desert fraught with ambushes, sleepless nights, the distant crack of AK-47 gunfire, and the smell of gunpowder mingling in the parched air. She had lost teammates, navigated mine-laden roads, and learned how to stand firm when the whole world seemed intent on dragging her down. But she didn't share those stories, not with Martha, not with anyone at Quantico. For her, the past was a closed book, and all she wanted was to live a peaceful life. But tonight, as the Iron Reapers walked into Liberty Diner, that book had been opened once again. Not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stand by and watch innocent people be threatened. The young mother with 2 kids, the waitress Jenny trembling behind the counter, and even Martha, these were the reasons she took action. And now, as she sat here with her coffee growing cold, she felt a subtle shift in the air. The gazes of the patrons were no longer just curious. They carried a sense of respect and a hint of fear. "Lydia," Martha said, her voice softer, "I don't know what happened to you in Iraq, but I do know one thing. You carry a strength within you that no one here truly understands." Lydia looked at her, her eyes tinged with a hint of sadness. "Maybe so," she said, But that strength isn't always a good thing, Martha. Sometimes it just reminds me of what I've lost. Martha didn't ask anything more. She simply placed her hand on Lydia's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze, then turned back to the counter. But when Lydia looked out the window, where the dim streetlights cast a glow on the empty street, she realized that the power she had tried to bury was just awakened, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it quiet. The lights in Liberty Diner dimmed as the clock struck 9 p.m. The patrons thinned out, leaving only a few lingering, whispering about the showdown with the Iron Reapers like a tale spreading through Quantico, Virginia. Lydia Harper remained in her usual corner, her second cup of coffee long gone cold in her hands. Martha had returned to the counter, busy wiping down the last few glasses, but her eyes occasionally flicked over to Lydia, a silent concern that Lydia could feel all too clearly. Lydia looked out the window, where the dim streetlights cast a glow over the empty street. The image of Jace crashing to the floor, his useless iron fist in hand, kept replaying in her mind. It wasn't because she was afraid of him she had faced far more dangerous people in Iraq, but because that moment pulled her back to a place she thought she had left behind forever. The sound of Snake's scream as she broke his arm, the groans of Silver Ring Guy as he fell, all echoed like gunfire in her memory, a symphony of war that she couldn't erase. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, she was no longer at Liberty Diner. She was in Fallujah, 2004, in the middle of a dusty, shattered street. Lydia, just 24 at the time, was leading her Force Recon team through an ambush zone. The crack of AK-47 gunfire echoed from rooftops, and makeshift bombs exploded less than 50 yards away. She remembered that day, the day she lost her first teammate, a young guy named Danny from Texas, who had been joking with her just hours before. A stray bullet had pierced his chest, and Lydia had pulled him into a hidden corner, pressing her hand firmly over the wound while screaming for a medic. But Danny didn't make it. She could still see his eyes, empty and distant, as his last breath slipped away. 3 tours of duty in Iraq, from Fallujah to Baghdad, and then Ramadi, left Lydia with scars that no one can see. She once parachuted into enemy territory, led her team through mine-laden paths, and faced death so many times that became a familiar companion. Force Recon is not a place for the faint-hearted. They are shadows on the battlefield, moving swiftly, striking hard, and disappearing before the enemy can react. Lydia learned how to stay calm when everything fell apart, how to give orders when the whole team was in a panic, and how to survive when hope seemed lost. But what is the price of survival? When she left the Marine Corps at the age of 30 with a Purple Heart and a long list of completed missions, she was no longer the Lydia Harper she once was. She became quiet, withdrawn, and carried a loneliness she would never admit to. Nightmares about Iraq, the sounds of bombs, the screams, Danny's face haunted her during those long nights, keeping her awake with a cup of coffee in hand. She moved to Quantico not just because it was close to her old base, but because she hoped this place would give her a chance to start over, to bury her past beneath the dust of a normal life. Working at the VA Veterans Center is her escape. There, she doesn't have to battle the enemies out there, but rather the demons within her old comrades. She teaches them how to use computers, how to face PTSD, how to rediscover meaning in a world without gunfire. Each of their smiles, each small step forward, is a little victory for her victories that don't require blood or bullets. But tonight, as the Iron Reapers walk into Liberty Diner, she realizes that the past isn't as easy to bury as she thought. "Lydia, are you still there?" Martha's voice rang out, pulling her from the depths of her memories. She stood in front of Lydia's desk, coffee pot in hand, her expression filled with concern. "You look like you just came back from a long trip." Lydia opened her eyes, giving a faint smile. "I'm okay, Martha. It's just remembering a few things." Martha set the coffee pot down and took a seat across from her, a rare moment for this always busy woman. "You don't have to share if you don't want to," she said. "But I can guess. What you did with those Iron Reapers, not everyone could handle that. You've been somewhere really harsh, haven't you?" Lydia looked at her, weighing whether to open up or not. Finally, she gave a slight nod. "Iraq," she said briefly. 3 times. Force Recon. I've seen things that no one should ever see." Martha was silent for a moment, then placed her hand on Lydia's. giving it a gentle squeeze. "I can't imagine," she said. "But I know one thing. You brought that strength back here, and you're using it to protect us. Don't think of it as a burden, Lydia. It's a gift." Lydia didn't respond right away. She looked down at the purple heart badge on her shirt, her fingers gently brushing against it. "Maybe you're right," she said, "but sometimes that gift weighs more than I want to admit." Martha stood up and patted her on the shoulder. "Take a break, honey. You deserve it." She turned back to the counter, leaving Lydia with her thoughts. But when she looked out the window again, a sense of unease crept into her heart. Jace and the Iron Reapers had left, but she knew they weren't the kind of people who were easily forgotten. Tonight's confrontation wasn't just a random event, it was a spark. And Lydia, whether she wanted to or not, could feel the power she had tried to suppress rise within her, ready to explode when the moment arrived. She wasn't seeking this fight, but if it came, she wouldn't run away. Liberty Diner has now returned to its usual rhythm. Even though the echoes of the confrontation with the Iron Reapers linger in every glance and whisper, the clock on the wall reads 9:30 p.m., and only a few customers are scattered around the old wooden tables. Lydia Harper sits quietly in her familiar corner, holding a cup of cold coffee, her distant gaze fixed on the empty street of Quantico, Virginia. Martha's words, "It's a gift," still resonate in her mind, but she's not sure she wants to accept that gift anymore. The soft chime of the doorbell rang gently, pulling her out of her thoughts. It wasn't the aggressive push of the Iron Reapers, but rather the timid sound of someone stepping inside. Lydia looked up to see a skinny young man, around 17 years old, wearing a faded gray hoodie. He stood at the threshold, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes darting around as if searching for someone. Martha, from behind the counter, smiled and greeted him. "Come on in, kid. Want something to eat?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to Lydia's table, his worn-out sneakers squeaking softly on the floor. You're the one who just defeated the Iron Reapers, right?" His voice trembled, but it was filled with curiosity. Lydia looked at him, her gaze softening but still sharp. "Maybe," she said. "Why do you ask?" He lowered his head, his fingers gripping the edge of his shirt tightly. I'm Ethan. I saw you through the window. I live nearby, and those guys used to bully me. Today was the first time I saw someone stand up to them." Lydia tilted her head, studying him more closely. Ethan was thin, but in his brown eyes, there was a small flame, the flame of a desire for change. She smiled gently. "You don't have to be afraid of them anymore. They're gone." Ethan nodded, but then he lowered his voice, whispering as if afraid someone might overhear. "I heard Jay say before he left. He said this isn't over. He will come back." He looked up, his eyes filled with worry. "What will you do?" Lydia set her coffee cup down, stood up, and walked closer to Ethan. She was half a head taller than him, but the way she stood steady and confident made him feel like she was a mountain. "If he comes back," she said, her voice low but firm, "I'll be here, and you can be here too, if you want to learn how to protect yourself." Ethan opened his eyes wide, surprised. "You're going to teach me?" "Maybe," Lydia replied, "but not to fight, to help you stand strong like I did." She gently patted his shoulder, a small gesture but full of strength, as if she were passing on a bit of the courage she carried from Iraq. Ethan smiled for the first time that night. "Thank you," he said, then turned away, stepping out the door with a lighter demeanor. Lydia watched him go, feeling a small flame ignite in her heart. The power she had once buried, the strength of a Force Recon warrior, was not just meant for battle. It was meant to protect, to inspire. And as she sat back down at the table, she knew that Jace and the Iron Reapers wouldn't just sit back and let things be. But this time, she was ready not just for herself, but for people like Ethan too. The next morning, the showdown at Liberty Diner woke the town of Quantico, Virginia, to a strange atmosphere. The usually quiet streets were now buzzing with whispers, from the grocery store on Main Street to the little coffee shops near the Quantico Marine Corps base. People weren't talking about the weather or last night's game. They were talking about Lydia Harper, the woman who took down 3 Iron Reapers in less than 30 seconds without breaking a sweat. But what no one expected not even Lydia herself, was that this story wouldn't just stay as whispers in the town. Lydia walked into Liberty Diner at 7 a.m., just like every day, her old boots echoing a steady rhythm on the wooden floor. She wore her familiar denim jacket, the tiny purple heart pin glinting in the early sunlight streaming through the window. Martha was already there, standing behind the counter with a brighter-than-usual smile, holding a coffee pot like a welcoming weapon. "Good morning, Hero Quantico," she called out, her tone teasing yet filled with pride. Lydia raised an eyebrow and tilted her head slightly. "What hero are you talking about, Martha? Have you been eavesdropping on those old men again?" She pulled her chair to her usual corner, trying to maintain her calm demeanor like she did every day. But Martha wasn't going to let her off that easily. She stepped forward, placing a steaming cup of coffee in front of Lydia, then pulled out her phone from her apron pocket. "No chit-chat, honey," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It's about this." She turned the screen toward Lydia, and what she saw made her freeze, the coffee cup in her hand nearly slipping off the table. It's a video of not-so-great quality, a bit shaky, but clearly filmed from inside Liberty Diner last night. The camera starts at the moment Jace and the Iron Reapers walk in, his voice booming with aggression. "Looks like we just found an interesting spot to rest our feet, brothers." Then the scene shifts quickly. Snake pulls out a knife. Lydia leans to dodge the blow, twisting his arm in an instant. The silver ring thug charges in, only to be taken down by a sharp elbow strike from her. And finally, Jace crashes hard to the floor after a perfect sweep from her. Her cold yet powerful counting of 1, 2 rings out, and the video ends with the Iron Reaper staggering back, leaving Lydia standing there, calm as a mountain in the midst of a storm. Lydia blinked, staring at the screen. "Who shot this?" she asked, her voice a bit hoarse from the shock. Martha laughed heartily. "Jenny. She was a waitress last night. The poor girl was shaking like a leaf when that crowd started causing trouble, but she still managed to whip out her phone and record it. She posted it online right after the cops showed up, and..." She paused, tapping on the stats below the video. "Look at this, Lydia. Over 50,000 views in just one night." Lydia felt a buzzing in her head. 50,000 views? She wasn't tech-savvy and didn't use social media, but she knew that number was significant. "I don't want this to spread," she said, her voice dropping. "I just want everyone to be at peace, Martha." But Martha shook her head, placed her hand on the table, and looked straight into her eyes. "Honey, this is no longer just your choice. It's spread. They're calling you the mysterious woman of Quantico. And not just here. We've heard that this video has reached all the way to Maryland and North Carolina this morning." Lydia leaned back in her chair, letting out a sigh. She didn't like the spotlight, didn't enjoy being the center of attention. 15 years in the Marine Corps, especially with Force Recon, had taught her how to operate in the shadows, to get the job done without anyone knowing her name. But now, the light from Liberty Diner was shining directly on her, and she didn't know what to do with it. The doorbell rang, and Ethan, the lanky young man from last night, stepped in with his eyes shining bright. "Ms. Lydia," he called out, almost running to her desk. "Have you seen it yet? Your video is everywhere. My friends at school just sent me a bunch of messages, and they're all going crazy about you." Lydia looked at him, trying to force a smile. "I see it, Ethan, but I'm not sure I like this." Ethan sat down in the chair across from her, unable to hide his excitement. "But don't you get it? You taught those Iron Reapers a lesson, and now everyone's talking about it. Some people are even calling you a real superhero, no cape needed." Martha chimed in, giggling. "I agree with this kid, Lydia. You just did something that no one at Quantico dared to stand up against. And now, the whole world knows about it." Lydia shook her head, but inside her, a strange feeling was rising. She didn't want to be a symbol, but Ethan's hopeful and admiring gaze reminded her of the days in Iraq when she led her team through danger. Perhaps, she thought, the strength she possessed was not just for protection, but also to inspire, even if she hadn't intended it that way. "Ms. Lydia," Ethan said, his voice dropping, "what do you think the Iron Reapers will do when they see this?" His question hung in the air, and Lydia felt a chill run down her spine. She looked out the window, where the early sunlight bathed the quiet streets of Quantico. This video was not just a clip. It was a spark that had just been ignited, and she knew that sooner or later it would spread, bringing both light and darkness with it. The noon hour at Liberty Diner was busier than ever. The doorbell chimed continuously as groups of people streamed in, not just locals, but also unfamiliar faces from nearby towns like Stafford and Fredericksburg, less than 20 miles from Quantico. They weren't there for burgers or coffee. They came to see for themselves the place where the mystery woman of Quantico took down the Iron Reapers. Lydia Harper sat at her usual corner table, trying to maintain her composure. But the curious glances and whispers surrounding her made her feel like she was under a giant magnifying glass. Martha, now busier than ever, darted back and forth with a tray of coffee and plates of food, but the smile on her face never faded. "Lydia, look at this!" she called out loudly as she brought another steaming cup of coffee for her. "I've never seen this place so packed since the Veterans Day Festival 5 years ago. You've turned this place into a hot spot." Lydia took a sip of her coffee, trying to hold back a sigh. "I'm not trying to do that, Martha," she said, her voice dropping. "I just want everything to be okay." But peace was a luxury she no longer held in her hands. Ethan, the lanky young man from last night, sat across from her, his phone glowing brightly with constant notifications. "Ms. Lydia, you have to see this," he said, his voice so excited it was almost a shout. "The video has over 200,000 views now. People are sharing it everywhere in Maryland, North Carolina, even D.C. Lydia looked at the screen that Ethan held up. Below the video, now titled "The Woman in Quantico Teaches the Iron Reapers a Lesson," were hundreds of comments rolling in endlessly. "Who is she? A real-life superhero?" One person wrote. "The Iron Reapers finally met their match," another added. There were even comments from veterans. "Just look at how she moves, definitely military. Respect." She felt her face heat up, not from pride, but from this unwanted attention. "Ethan, turn it off," Lydia said, her voice a bit tense. "I don't need to know those numbers." But Ethan shook his head, his eyes shining bright. "You don't understand, Ms. Lydia. This is huge. Everyone at my school is talking about you. Some even say they want to learn how to fight like you, so they won't get bullied anymore. You're an inspiration." Lydia looked at him, her gaze softening for a moment. She recalled his words from the night before about how the Iron Reapers had bullied him, and now she saw a glimmer of hope in Ethan's brown eyes. Maybe, she thought, this video wasn't just trouble. But before she could say anything, the doorbell rang again, this time bringing in a new group of people not regulars, but bunch of guys in leather jackets, not Iron Reapers, but clearly motorcycle enthusiasts. Martha stepped forward to greet them, but Lydia stood up, her fight-or-flight instincts kicking in like a warning bell. This group, about 5 people, had road sentinels stitched on their jackets, a smaller motorcycle gang from Stafford, not as notorious as the Iron Reapers, but certainly not harmless either. The leader, a tall guy with a gray beard, approached her table, his gaze scrutinizing. "You're the one in the video, right?" The guy asked, his voice deep but not hostile. "I'm Hank, the leader of the Road Sentinels. We heard about what happened last night and watched that footage. You really gave the Iron Reapers a run for their money." Lydia nodded slightly, maintaining a relaxed yet ready posture. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said. "I just want to protect the people in the bar." Hank nodded, as if in agreement. "I get it. But listen, the Iron Reapers aren't the kind of people who forget easily. Jace, their leader, has an ego as big as Virginia. This video is driving him crazy, and we've heard whispers that he's gathering people come back here." Lydia felt her heart race a little faster, but her face remained unchanged. "Thanks for the heads up," she said. "But if he comes back, I'll handle it." Hank chuckled softly, his eyes reflecting a hint of respect. "I believe you can do it. But it's not just us. The whole area is buzzing about you. They say you're a veteran, right? Marine Corps?" "That's right," Lydia replied briefly, not wanting to delve deeper. Hank nodded again, then turned to his team. "Did you hear that, guys? She's a real deal." He looked back at Lydia. "If you need someone watching your back, the Road Sentinels are ready. Not everyone around here likes the Iron Reapers." Lydia tilted her head slightly, surprised by the offer. "I appreciate it," she said, "but I don't want to get anyone in trouble." Hank shrugged and led the group away, leaving Lydia with a mix of emotions. She sat down, watching Ethan still glued to his phone. "Did you see?" he said. "It's not just me. The whole world is on your side." But the world that Ethan spoke of wasn't just filled with light. As night fell over Quantico, about 3 miles from Liberty Diner, Jay stood in an old warehouse near Route 95, surrounded by the Iron Reapers, his face flushed with anger. In front of him was an old phone, replaying a video that had now surpassed 300,000 views. The mocking laughter from social media pierced his self-esteem like a knife. "Who does that little girl think she is?" Jay shouted, slamming his hand down on the wooden table, making the beer bottle next to him shake. "She turned me into a joke in front of the whole crew. I swear, I'm going back to Quantico and I'm going to show her that Iron Reapers are not something to mess with." Snake, his hand still bandaged from Lydia's twist, nodded in agreement. "It's fast, Jace, but this time, we won't let it catch us off guard again. We need more people." Jay squinted, the light from the phone screen illuminating his scarred face. "Calling more guys from Richmond," he ordered. "This video is war and I'm going to win." Meanwhile, at Liberty Diner, Lydia gazed out the window, a mix of unease from Hank's warning swirling with Ethan's hopeful gaze. That video wasn't just a clip. It was a fire spreading, illuminating Quantico, while also bringing darkness from the Iron Reapers. She didn't want war, but if it came, she knew she wouldn't back down. The second night after the confrontation at Liberty Diner, Quantico, Virginia was no longer a peaceful small town. News of the mysterious woman had spread far beyond the road surrounding the Marine Corps base, reaching major cities like Richmond and Washington, D.C., less than 50 miles away. Lydia Harper's phone buzzed incessantly from early morning, with calls from unknown numbers and messages from people she had never met. She had it on silent, but as she walked into Liberty Diner at 6 p.m., she knew she couldn't hide forever. The restaurant was packed, with not a single empty seat in sight. Martha darted around like a whirlwind, pouring coffee while shouting to Chef in the back, "We need 3 more plates of burgers. Hurry up." But when she spotted Lydia, she paused, wiped her hands on her apron, and rushed over with a beaming smile. "Lydia, oh my God, you arrived just in time," she exclaimed, her voice slightly breathless. "Look around. The whole world is coming here because of you." Lydia looked around, feeling like she had stepped into a different reality. Local families were squeezed in with motorcycle riders from Stafford and Fredericksburg, some wearing jackets emblazoned with the logos of small clubs like the Road Sentinels. There were also folks in polo shirts, clearly office workers from D.C., and a group of young people, including Ethan, gathered in the corner of the bar, phones in hand, laughing and chatting animatedly. On the wall, a small TV was playing the local news, and Lydia's face appeared on the screen with the headline, "Mysterious Veteran Takes Down Gang at Quantico." "What's going on, Martha?" Lydia asked, her voice tinged with confusion. She pulled a chair down to her usual corner, but everyone's eyes in the cafe immediately turned toward her, making her feel like she was under the spotlight. Martha sat down across from her, sliding a steaming cup of coffee toward her. "You haven't heard?" she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Your video has now surpassed 500,000 views. The local news started covering it this morning, and now even the big networks in D.C. are jumping on board. They're calling you the Warrior of Liberty Diner. People are going wild over you, Lydia." Lydia clutched her coffee cup, trying to stay calm. "I don't want this," she said, her voice dropping. "I just want to protect everyone that night, not to become something on TV." But before Martha could respond, Ethan jumped in, practically leaping out of his seat. "Ms. Lydia, can't you see? This is bigger than you think. Look at this." He held up his phone, the screen displaying a social media post with over 10,000 likes. She's a former Marine, took down 3 Iron Reapers in 30 seconds. This is a hero we need. Below the post were a flurry of comments from all over Maryland, North Carolina, and even as far away as Georgia. Lydia looked at him, her eyes flickering with a hint of unease. "Ethan, I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." Ethan shook his head, refusing to give in. You don't understand. At my school, the kids used to be so scared of the Iron Reapers that they wouldn't dare walk home alone. Now they're talking about you, saying they want to be strong like you. You've changed everything." Before Lydia could respond, the doorbell rang again, this time bringing in someone she never expected. Hank, the leader of the Road Sentinels, walked in with 3 other members, all dressed in leather jackets, but not carrying the menacing vibe of the Iron Reapers. Hank headed straight for her desk, his expression serious yet sincere. "Lydia Harper, right?" Hank said, his voice deep. "I mentioned yesterday that your video is shaking things up around here. But now it's not just a Quantico thing anymore. Motorcycle clubs from Maryland to North Carolina are talking about you. A few groups want to meet you, want to understand how you pulled this off." Lydia tilted her head, her voice calm yet wary. "What do they want from me?" Hank sat down and signaled to his crew behind him. "It's not a problem," he said. "It's an opportunity. The Iron Reapers are a thorn in the side of many, not just us. Your video dealt him a serious blow, not just a person but to Jace's ego. Now people want to know who you are, and a few groups like ours want to stand by your side." Lydia looked at him, weighing her words. "I'm not looking for allies, Hank," she said. "I don't want a war with the Iron Reapers or anyone else." Hank nodded, but his gaze didn't leave her. "I understand, but the war has already begun, whether you like it or not. That video didn't just drive Jace crazy. It also gave people hope. People like this kid." He pointed at Ethan. "They see you as a light in the darkness that the Iron Reapers have left behind." Hank's word hung in the air, and Lydia felt a surge of mixed emotions rise within her. She didn't want that light, but as she looked around at Ethan's admiring gaze, Martha's proud smile, and Hank's sincerity, she realized she could no longer turn her back on it. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. She stood up, her voice ringing clear above the noise of the cafe. "If anyone wants something from this," she said, looking around, "it's not to fight. I've been to Iraq, protecting innocent people. If this video has power, then let's use it to build, not to destroy." Ethan opened his eyes wide. "What do you mean, Ms. Lydia?" She looked at him, then at Hank. "I work at the VA Veterans Center. I see veterans who fought lose their sense of purpose when they come home. If anyone wants to join me, let's help those veterans, kids like you. We can do something better than Iron Reapers." Hank smiled for the first time that night. "I like that idea. We have a few veterans in the group. If you take the lead, the Road Sentinels will join in." Martha clapped her hands and laughed loudly. "I knew it. You're not just a warrior, Lydia. You're a guide." In that moment, a name flashed in Lydia's mind. Eagle Ascent. Like an eagle spreading its wings from the ashes. She hadn't voiced it yet, but she felt the fire from the video had transformed into a beacon, illuminating not just Quantico, but far beyond. Her phone buzzed again, a message from the VA center. "Ms. Harper, we just received 10 calls from veterans wanting to join because of your video. What do you think?" Lydia looked around, from Ethan to Hank, then to Martha. She didn't want to be a symbol, but now she was one not just of strength, but of hope. "Eagle Ascent," she whispered, and the first smile of the day blossomed on her lips. The movement had begun, and even if the Iron Reapers came back, she knew she was no longer alone. On the 3rd night after the incident at Liberty Diner, about 3 miles from downtown Quantico, Virginia, an old, run-down warehouse stood alone by Highway 95, shrouded in darkness. A dim light from a hanging bulb flickered above a chaotic lineup of motorcycles, the smell of engine oil and cigarette smoke mingling in the chilly air. This was the hideout of the Iron Reapers, where Jace, the notorious gang leader Virginia, stood with his hand resting on a battered wooden table. His bloodshot eyes glued to the old phone in front of him. The screen lights up a video that has now surpassed 700,000 views. The mocking laughter snake as he pulls out a knife. His agonizing scream when Lydia twists his arm, and a loud crash of Jace hitting the floor of Liberty Diner echo repeatedly, like a relentless torture soundtrack. Jace clenches his fist, his knuckles turning white. The brass knuckles he once took pride in now lying discarded beside him, as useless as a forgotten toy. "Damn it!" Jace shouted, slamming his hand down on the table. causing the empty beer bottle beside it to shake. His roar echoed through the warehouse, drawing the attention of the other Iron Reapers, about 10 guys, all of whom fell silent, too scared to speak. He turned around, his scarred face twisted in anger. That girl made a fool out of me. 700,000 people watched me fall like a clown. Snake, his right hand still bandaged from Lydia's twist, leaned against a motorcycle, his gaze cast down. "She's fast, Jace," he muttered, his voice rough. "Faster than anyone I've ever fought. I didn't see her coming." Jace spun around, pointing at Snake. "Can't you see? Then why did you let him break your arm like it was a dry twig? I brought you guys in there to prove our strength, not to become a joke for all of Virginia." He stepped closer to Snake, his breath heavy, but then stopped, turned away, and ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. Inside Jace, a raging anger burned fiercely, but deep down, a different feeling was creeping in doubt. He had led the Iron Reapers for over 10 years, transforming them from a small group in Richmond into a gang that struck fear across the region. Standing at 6'2" and weighing 240 pounds, he had always been the strongest, the one no one dared to challenge. But that night at Liberty Diner, Lydia Harper, a woman who seemed utterly ordinary to the unthinkable, she made him feel small. He sat down on an old chair, his gaze glued to the video. The clip paused at the moment Lydia stood over him, her voice cold and cutting. "I am the protector of the innocent." Those words were not just a statement. They were a knife stabbing straight into Jace's pride. He had once thought himself invincible, that the Iron Reapers were a symbol of power. But now, the whole world was laughing at him, and the name Lydia Harper spread like a fire he couldn't extinguish. "Jace," a gravelly voice echoed from the corner of the warehouse. It was Tommy, a short guy with a buzz cut and tired eyes, a longtime member of the Iron Reapers. He used to be an infantryman in Iraq, but got kicked out for his drinking problem. "I know you're mad, but that girl, she's not normal. I've seen those Force Recon guys in Baghdad. Fast, precise, fearless. She's just like them." Jay squinted and turned to Tommy. "What are you saying? Force Recon? Marines?" He scoffed, but the sound couldn't hide his unease. "You want me to believe that a girl in a diner used to be a Special Forces soldier?" Tommy shrugged, his voice dropping. "I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm just saying what I saw. The way it moves, the way it takes us down isn't something an ordinary person can learn. Did you see it shake? Not even a little." Tommy's words were like a drop of water that overflowed the cup. Jay shot up, stepping closer to Tommy, his face just inches away from his. "So what do you want? Are you scared of him? Do you want me to beg him for forgiveness?" He shouted, but Tommy didn't back down, just looking back with an unusually calm gaze. "I'm not afraid," Tommy said, "but I know he's not fighting just to show off. He's protecting the people in the bar like I used to protect my teammates in Iraq before everything went sideways. Do you think we're going down the wrong path, Jace?" Tommy's question hung in the air, and for the first time that night, Jace didn't shout back. He turned away, walking toward the shed door, gazing out into the pitch-black night. The cold wind blew through, carrying the damp scent of Quantico, but it did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside him. He had once taken pride in the Iron Reapers, a family he had built from lost souls. But now, that family was cracking under the weight of that video. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through the comments under the video. "Jace is a loser," one person wrote. "Iron Reapers are washed up," another added. But one comment made him stop in his tracks. "That woman gives me hope. True strength isn't about bullying." He stared at those words, and for a brief moment, an old memory flooded back images of a little blonde girl, his daughter Lily, who used to call him her hero when he was still a kind father. Jace turned off his phone and tossed it onto the table. "Get ready," he barked at the Iron Reapers. "We're heading back to Quantico. I'm going to show that girl who's really in charge." But as he turned away, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a tiny crack in the facade he didn't want anyone to see. The old warehouse by Route 95 was steeped in a tense atmosphere after Jace's declaration. The dim light from the ceiling illuminated the scarred faces of the Iron Reapers, but no one dared to meet their leader's gaze. Jace stood there, hands braced against the wooden table, his breath heavy like a wounded beast. He had just ordered preparations to return to Quantico, but inside him, another battle was raging, a battle he was reluctant to acknowledge. Snake, calling more guys from Richmond, Jace roared, his voice echoing in the cramped space. I want at least 20 brothers here before dawn. We're going to show that girl that the Iron Reapers are not to be messed with. He turned around, his cold gaze sweeping over his crew. Anyone who doesn't go knows the consequences. Snake nodded, even though his bandaged right hand trembled slightly as he picked up the phone. All right, Jace, I'll call right away. But this time, we need a plan. That girl isn't just some ordinary person. Tommy is right. She has military skills. Jace squinted and turned to Tommy, who was still sitting quietly on an old chair in the corner of the warehouse. What else do you want to say, Tommy? He asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You think I'm scared of her? You think I can't handle a girl at the diner? Tommy looked up, his eyes weary but unflinching. I'm not saying you're scared, Jace, he replied, his voice steady and low. I'm saying it's different. I've seen guys like him in Iraq. Force Recon doesn't mess around. He took down 3 of us in under 30 seconds without breaking a sweat. You think adding 20 more people is going to change that? Jay stepped closer to Tommy, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor, his face just inches from Tommy's. Are you challenging me? He growled, his hand clenched into a fist. Have you forgotten who I am? I built Iron Reapers from the ground up, and no little punk is going to tear that down. Tommy didn't back down, even with Jace's breath hot against his face. I'm not challenging you, he said. I'm just asking. What do you want? Revenge to prove your ego, or to help us survive this? That video didn't just humiliate you, it made all of us a joke. But if you go back there and lose again, the Iron Reapers won't be able to stand strong anymore. Tommy's words struck Jace like a knife to his pride. He turned away, slamming his hand against a nearby motorcycle, making it shake violently. You think I don't know? He shouted, his voice hoarse with anger. You think I don't see the whole world laughing at me? But I won't let it win. I'll show who the real strong one is. But when he shouted, another memory surged back, stronger than the last. He saw Lily, his 12-year-old daughter, with her shiny blonde hair and radiant smile. When she was little, Jace was her hero, the dad who taught her to ride a bike, the one who held her when she fell. But then everything changed. After getting kicked out of his mechanic job in Richmond for fighting, Jace dove into the Iron Reapers, and Lily slowly drifted away from him. Now, he only saw her a few times a year, during the brief visits her mother reluctantly allowed. Jace, are you okay? Snake asked, his voice hesitant as he saw his leader standing still, staring off into the distance. You look like you just saw a ghost. Jace didn't respond. He stepped out of the storage shed, the cold wind blowing through his matted hair. He pulled a cigarette from his jacket pocket, lit it, and took a long drag. The white smoke swirled in the air, but it didn't ease the storm brewing inside him. He remembered the last time he saw Lily, 6 months ago, when she looked at him with disappointment in her eyes. Why doesn't Dad do anything good anymore? She had asked. He brushed it off, telling her that the Iron Reapers were his family, his strength. But now, with Lydia Harper's video spreading across social media, he wondered if Lily had seen it, and what she would think of the father who had fallen at the hands of a woman in a diner. Jace, Tommy stepped closer, his voice softer. I know you're angry, but do you think we might be doing this wrong? I joined the Iron Reapers because you gave me a place to belong after I got kicked out of the military. But now I'm not so sure if that's what I want anymore. Jace turned back, his gaze sharp as a knife. You want to ditch me, Tommy? He growled. You want to run over to that girl, huh? Tommy shook his head. No, I just want you to think it over. That girl, Lydia Harper, she's not fighting for fame. She's fighting for others. I used to do that in Iraq before I lost my way. What about you? What are you fighting for? Tommy's question hit Jace like a punch to the gut. He took another drag from a cigarette, but it did nothing to ease the growing emptiness inside him. He used to think the Iron Reapers were all about strength, power, and respect. But now, with the whole world watching that video, all he felt was humiliation. And deep down, he knew Tommy was right He wasn't even sure what he was fighting for anymore. "Get the car ready," Jace said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Tomorrow, we're heading back to Quantico. I'm going to show the whole world that I'm not a loser." But as he turned away, his gaze wavered, and for the first time in years, Jace felt a small crack in the wall of pride he had built up. He didn't want to admit it, but Tommy's words, the memory of Lily, and the image of Lydia Harper standing strong in the video were planting a seed of doubt in his mind, a seed he couldn't extinguish. The dawn was just breaking on Route 95, about 3 miles from Quantico, Virginia, as the first light filtered through the cracks of the old warehouse where the Iron Reapers were gathering. The roar of motorcycle engines echoed from a distance, signaling that the brothers from Richmond had arrived at Jace's command. Inside, the atmosphere was thick, like a storm cloud ready to burst. More than 20 men in black leather jackets were scattered around the warehouse, some checking their weapons' knives, iron rods, while others whisper among themselves, their gazes flickering between confidence and anxiety. But Jace wasn't with them. He stood alone at the door, a cigarette in hand burned down to the filter, his eyes fixed on the misty horizon. Last night, after the conversation with Tommy, Jace couldn't sleep. He sat for hours in an old chair, replaying the video of Lydia Harper on his worn-out phone, each replay stabbing deeper into his pride like a knife. He had called in reinforcements, plotted his revenge, but Tommy's words, "What are you fighting for?" kept echoing in his mind, refusing to fade away. Then, as dawn approached, his phone buzzed with an unexpected number. Lily's mother, the ex-wife he hadn't spoken to civilly in over 5 years. Jace lit a new cigarette, took a long drag to steady himself, and then stepped away from the warehouse, where the noise of the Iron Reapers couldn't drown out his thoughts. He hit the redial button, and after 2 rings, his ex-wife Karen's voice came through, cold yet urgent. "Jace, what the hell are you doing?" she asked immediately, cutting straight to the chase. He frowned, his voice hoarse as he replied, "Karen, why are you calling at this hour? What's going on? Why are you even asking?" Karen snapped. "Lily just watched a video online, the one where a woman took you down in that diner. The poor kid has been crying all morning, Jace. She's asking me why her dad turned into a thug, why you're no longer her hero." Karen's words hit Jace like a punch to the gut. He stood frozen, the cigarette in his hand trembling slightly, white smoke swirling in the chilly air. "Lily? Did Lily see that video?" he mumbled, his voice trailing off. "Why did you let her watch it?" "I won't allow it." Karen shouted over the phone. "She found it online, Jace. The whole world is watching you fall flat at the hands of a woman, and Lily doesn't understand why her dad is the bad guy in this. She's crying and asking me if you're going to be a good guy again. You tell me, what are you going to do about her?" Jace felt a buzzing in his head. He leaned against the wall of the storage shed, his 240-pound frame suddenly feeling as heavy as lead. He remembered Lily, the little girl with the blue eyes like her mother and a smile that shone like sunshine. He recalled the days when he was truly a father, before the Iron Reapers took over his life. But now, the image he saw in his daughter's eyes was no longer that of a hero. It was a defeated bully in a small diner in Quantico. "Karen," Jace hesitated, his voice breaking. "I don't want Lily to see me like this. I just want to prove that I'm not weak." "Weak?" Karen scoffed, but there was a hint of pain in her voice. "Jace, you used to be the strongest person I knew when you were working, when you were taking care of Lily. But now you're just a guy chasing after thugs to feel important. And now the whole world sees you losing to a woman someone Lily calls truly strong. Did you hear that? The girl admires her, not you." Jace tightened his grip on the phone, his other hand pounding against the wall of the storage shed, sending dust flying everywhere. "Don't say that," he shouted. "I'm her father. I'll show that girl I'm not a loser. I will—" "Jace, stop it." Karen interrupted, her voice trembling. "Lily doesn't need you to prove anything. She needs a father, not a fool who fights to save his own ego. What do you want her to think of you? A bully who got beaten down, or a father who knows how to make things right?" The call ended with a long beep, leaving Jay standing there breathless, his eyes red-rimmed. He tossed a cigarette to the ground, stomping on it hard, but the anger inside him didn't fade, it just morphed into something else, a chaos he couldn't name. He recalled the moment Lydia stood over him in the video. Her gaze not one of disdain but of determination, as if she were protecting something bigger than herself. And then Lily's words, spoken through Karen's voice, echoed in his mind. "Why isn't Dad my hero anymore?" Jace returned to the warehouse, his face twisted in a mix of anger and pain. Snake and Tommy stood near the door, watching him with questioning eyes. "Jace, are you okay?" Snake asked. "Who called?" "Not your business," Jace growled, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. He stepped up to the table, picked up the brass knuckles, and tightened his grip around them. "We're still going to Quantico," he said, his tone dropping. "But not to fight. I need to meet that girl, Lydia Harper. I need to know who she is." Tommy raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Meet him? What are you planning to do?" Jace didn't respond right away. He looked down at the iron fists, then dropped them onto the table, the sound of metal hitting wood ringing sharply. "I don't know," he said, his voice trailing off. "But I need to understand why Lily thinks it's stronger than me." Snake scoffed, but Tommy just nodded, his eyes flickering with a hint of hope. "Maybe you'll find something, Jace," he said. "Maybe it's not just an enemy." Jace didn't respond. He stepped outside, the early sunlight shining on his scarred face. The call from Lily had shaken the proud walls he had built around himself, and for the first time in many years, he felt a longing that wasn't for revenge, but to reclaim what he had lost. But he didn't know how to do it, and the road to Quantico was no longer just a battle. It was a question he had to answer for himself. If you've ever believed that a single moment can change your entire life, hit like for Jace and his journey to rediscover himself. Don't forget to subscribe to the Legendary Narratives channel to witness the transformation of a foe into a hero with us. Thank you. The morning in Quantico, Virginia, was bathed in gentle sunlight, but inside Lydia Harper, a sense of unease lingered. She sat in her familiar corner of Liberty Diner, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her, her gaze drifting out to the peaceful street where military vehicles occasionally passed by. Her video had now surpassed 1 million views, and the name Eagle Ascent, which she had whispered last night to Martha, Hank, and Ethan, was slowly becoming a reality. But as she thought about the Iron Reapers, about Jace and Hank's warning, she knew that the fire sparked by the video not only brought hope, but could also lead to trouble. The doorbell chimed softly, and Lydia looked up to see Ethan stepping inside. The lanky young man wore a faded gray hoodie, his bright eyes shining as always, but today there was something different about his demeanor and urgency, almost a hint of worry. He rushed to her table, sitting down without waiting for an invitation, his voice slightly breathless. "Ms. Lydia, I just heard some big news," he exclaimed, gripping his phone tightly. Lydia raised an eyebrow and set her coffee cup down. "What's going on, Ethan? You look like you just ran a mile to get here." "I'm almost right," Ethan replied with a sheepish grin. "I was just at school about a mile away, and I heard some friends talking. The Iron Reapers, Jason, those guys, they're getting ready to head back to Quantico. Someone spotted over 20 motorcycles coming from Richmond this morning." Lydia felt her heart race a little faster, but her face remained calm. "Are you sure?" she asked, her tone flat. "Who told you that?" "A friend from school," Ethan said. "He has a cousin who races with some small crews around here. He said Jace is really messed up after that video, and he wants revenge. But—" he hesitated, his gaze wavering. He also heard something strange. "Jace doesn't want to fight. He wants to meet her." Lydia tilted her head, her sharp gaze fixed on Ethan. "You want to see me? For what purpose?" Ethan shrugged, his voice dropping. "No one really knows for sure, but my buddy said Jace seems different, not as aggressive as usual. Some people even heard him mention a girl. Like, his kid saw a video and it made him rethink things." Lydia leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly tapping on the wooden table. She recalled the look in Jace's eyes when he left Liberty Diner that night, not just anger, but something deeper, like a crack in his fierce exterior. If Ethan was right, if Jace really had a child and that kid had seen the video, then maybe she had unwittingly touched on a part of him that he kept hidden. But she wasn't naive. Iron Reapers weren't the type to give up easily. "Ethan," she said, her voice low but firm, "if Jace wants to meet me, I'll meet him, but not to fight. I've already told you and Hank that I want build, not destroy. Ethan nodded, his eyes lighting up with hope. I know, Ms. Lydia. That's why I'm here. I want to help. If Jace comes back, I want to stand with you, not to fight, but to show him that we're stronger in a different way. Lydia looked at him, surprised by the determination in Ethan's voice. She remembered the night he came to her, trembling but filled with a desire for change. Now he was no longer the scared child. He was growing up, and she realized she had some responsibility in that transformation. Are you sure? She asked. This isn't a game, Ethan. I'm sure, he replied, his voice steady. You taught me that being strong isn't about bullying. I want to learn more from you, and if Jace wants to talk, I want him to see that I'm not afraid anymore. Lydia smiled softly, the first time that day. All right, she said, but you stay close to me, and we're not going to let this turn violent. If Jace wants to talk, I'll listen. Ethan nodded, and as he stood up to call Martha for a glass of water, Lydia gazed out the window. She thought about Jace, about the call from his daughter that Ethan had mentioned, about the crack in his heart that she had unintentionally created. The Iron Reapers could come with their fury, but if there was even a glimmer of hope to change them, she would seize it. Eagle Ascent was no longer just an idea, it was a path, and Ethan, with his newfound courage, was a first seed planted. She took a sip of her coffee, the feeling of unease gradually giving way to determination. If Jace showed up, she would confront him not as an enemy, but as someone ready to guide the way. And deep down, she knew that the awakening of the enemy was not just Jace's story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The midday sun in Quantico, Virginia blazed down with the harshness of autumn, but the atmosphere around Liberty Diner fell heavy, like the calm before a storm. Lydia Harper stood in the diner's parking lot, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her denim jacket, her deep blue eyes scanning the road leading into town. Beside her was Ethan, a lanky young man in a gray hoodie, his bright eyes betraying his anxiety. Since early morning, news of over 20 motorcycles rolling in from Richmond had spread like wildfire, and now the distant roar of engines was growing louder, signaling that the Iron Reapers had arrived. Lydia, are you sure? Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. If Jace wants to fight, we don't have enough people. Lydia turned to him, offering a gentle smile to reassure him. I'm sure, Ethan, she said, her voice steady yet firm. He's not here to fight. You said he wanted to talk to me. I'll give him a chance to speak. If things go south, I know how to handle it. Ethan nodded, though his hand still gripped the hem of his shirt tightly. In the distance, the silhouettes of over 20 motorcycles appeared on Main Street, dust swirling in the sunlight. Jace led the pack, his tall 6'2" frame standing out on the sleek black Harley, his scarred face cold but no longer as menacing as it had been the night at Liberty Diner. Behind him were Snake, Tommy, and the rest of the Iron Reapers, all clad in black leather jackets adorned with the iron skull emblem that had once sent shivers down Quantico's spine. The line of cars came to a stop about 50 yards from Liberty Diner, engines winding down, leaving behind a tense silence. Jay stepped out of the car, his heavy boots thudding against the ground, his gaze locked onto Lydia. He wasn't carrying his brass knuckles, and his hands were empty, a strange sight for someone like Jace. Lydia stepped forward, Ethan close beside her, and she raised her hand to signal him to stop when the distance between her and Jace shrank to just 10 feet. Jace, Lydia said, her voice low but clear. You wanted to see me. I'm here. Go ahead, speak. Jace looked at her, his gaze wavering between anger and something deeper. He took a long breath and said, his voice hoarse, Lydia Harper, right? Your video has turned me into a joke. Over 1 million people watch me fall at your hands. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Lydia nodded slightly, her eyes locked on him. I didn't record that video, Jace. I don't want the fame. I just want to protect the people in the bar. But I heard you didn't come here to fight. So what do you want? Jace clenched his fist tightly, but then relaxed, a flicker of pain crossing his face. My daughter, Lily, she saw that video, he said, his voice trailing off. She called me this morning, crying and asking why I'm the bad guy. She used to think I was a hero, but now, he paused, turning his face away, trying to hide his vulnerability from the Iron Reapers. Lydia was silent for a moment, then stepped closer, her voice soft yet firm. "Jace, I don't know your daughter, but I know you're not a completely bad guy. I saw how you left that night. You didn't come back to hurt me right away. If you want to change for Lily, I can help." Jace turned back, his eyes filled with suspicion. "Help? You think I need your pity? I brought the Iron Reapers here to reclaim my honor." "Not pity," Lydia interrupted. "It's about opportunity. I used to be in Iraq, protecting innocent people. Now I work at the VA Veteran Center, helping people like you, those who have lost their way, find their path again. If you want Lily to see you as a hero, then don't fight me. Do something better." Tommy, standing behind Jace, stepped forward, his eyes weary but glimmering with a hint of hope. "Jace, listen to her," he said. "I told you we were going down the wrong path. That video didn't just embarrass you. It reminded me of who I used to be in Iraq. I want to stop." Jace turned to Tommy, his face twisted in anger and confusion. "You want to leave the Iron Reapers?" he shouted. "You want me to disband everything?" "It's not about giving up," Lydia interjected. "It's about changing. I call it Eagle Ascent, a new path, not about bullying but about protecting and building. You can lead them, Jace, but not with a fist." Snake scoffed from the back. "Jace, do you really believe this girl? She took us down in 30 seconds. Now you want to beg her?" But Jace raised his hand, signaling for Snake to be quiet. He looked at Lydia, then at Tommy, and finally, his gaze landed on Ethan, the lanky young man standing firm beside Lydia, no longer trembling like he had on the first night. "Lily wants me to be a good guy," he muttered, almost to himself. "But I don't know where to start." Lydia stepped forward, just 3 feet away from him. "Starting from here," she said, "dissolve the Iron Reapers. Come with me to the VA Center. I'll teach you and those who want to live differently how to fix cars, help veterans, and protect the community. Lily will see who you really are." Jace fell silent, his hands trembling slightly. Then he turned to the Iron Reapers, his voice ringing out, no longer aggressive but filled with a different kind of determination. "The Iron Reapers are finished," he said. "Whoever wants to follow me, come with me. Those who don't, get out of here." Snake shook his head, turning away with a few other guys, but Tommy and more than a dozen others stayed behind, their eyes flickering between doubt and hope. Jace looked at Lydia and nodded slightly. "Lead the way," he said, and in that moment, a new journey began. As dusk settled over Quantico, Virginia, a warm orange glow enveloped the VA Veteran Center, located about 2 miles east of Liberty Diner. The low-rise building with its red brick walls stood quietly amidst a small parking lot, where more than a dozen motorcycles belonging to the Iron Reapers were lined up, dust from the road still clinging to their wheels. Jay stood at the front door, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his leather jacket, his skeptical gaze sweeping over the sign that read Veterans Affairs. Beside him was Tommy, his tired face brightened by a glimmer of hope, and Ethan, the lanky young man in a gray hoodie, walking closely alongside Lydia Harper like a little sidekick. Lydia led the way, opening the glass door of the center and signaling for the group to step inside. "This is where I work," she said, her voice deep yet clear. "It's not a gang hideout. It's not a battlefield. It's a place to start over. If you want to follow me, this is a first step." Jace took a deep breath, stepping to the doorway, his heavy boots thudding against the tile floor. The remaining dozen Iron Reapers, those who chose to stay after Snake and a few others left, hesitated to follow, their gazes flickering between curiosity and unease. Inside, the center was nothing special. A few wooden tables, a corner filled with skill books, and pictures of veterans hanging on the walls. But for Jace, this place felt as foreign as another world, a world without fists or the roar of motorcycles. "Have a seat," Lydia said, pointing to the folding chairs around a large table. She stood at the head of the table, her deep blue eyes locked onto Jace. "I told you, Eagle Ascent isn't about violence. We're here to fix cars, help veterans, and protect the community. But to do that, you all have to leave the past behind." Jay sat down, the chair creaking under his 240-pound weight. He looked at her, his gaze still filled with doubt. "You make it sound so easy, Harper," he said, his voice gravelly. "The Iron Reapers are all I've had for the past 10 years. Now you're telling me to throw it away and be a good person? I don't even know how to be a good person anymore. Tommy, sitting next to Jace, spoke up, his voice low but firm. You know, Jace, you used to be Lily's dad. You did good things for her. I did too, before Iraq and the booze led me astray. I used to help my buddies. She's not telling us to throw it all away. She's telling us to use it differently. Jace turned to Tommy, his eyes flashing with anger. What am I supposed to do with it? Fix cars for a bunch of old men? Who am I if not the leader of the Iron Reapers? A failure that my daughter doesn't even want to look at anymore. Lydia tilted her head, her voice soft yet unwavering. You're not a failure, Jace. You're the one who brought these more than a dozen people here, instead of going off to fight. That's a first step. I've seen people like you lost after the war in Iraq, but they found their way back. You can too. A guy in the group, tall and lanky with greasy hair, named Ray, sneered from the corner of the table. Sounds nice, but what's the reality? We live by strength, not by some cheesy words. You think we're just going to turn into a bunch of obedient mechanics. Lydia looked straight at Ray, her gaze sharp as a knife. Strength isn't about bullying, Ray. I took down 3 of your guys in 30 seconds without a knife or a gun. True strength is getting back up after you fall and helping others to stand up too. Want to give a shot? Ray bowed his head, not responding, but his eyes flickered. Jace looked around, seeing the doubt in the eyes of his old followers, and a heavy feeling settled in his chest. He stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the parking lot where the iconic Iron Reaper's motorcycle stood still. I don't know if I can do this, Harper, he said, his voice dropping. Lily wants a change, but I don't even know where to start. Ethan, who had been silent and listening from the start, suddenly spoke up, his voice trembling but resolute. I'll start, he said, standing up to face Jace. I used to be so afraid of you and the Iron Reapers that I wouldn't even step outside. But Ms. Lydia showed me that being strong isn't about bullying. It's about protecting. If you want Lily to see you as a hero, then protect people like me. Jace turned back, looking at Ethan, a scrawny kid he had once ignored. But the boy's eyes were no longer filled with fear, and that made Jace pause. You're not scared of me anymore? He asked, his voice tinged with surprise. No, Ethan replied, because I saw Lydia take you down, and I know you're not invincible. But you could be someone else, someone better. Lydia stepped forward and placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder. He's right, Jace, she said. I'm going to teach you guys how to fix cars, not just to make a living, but to help veterans like Tommy, who need transportation. You were once a team. Now be a team for something bigger. Tommy nodded, his eyes lighting up. I used to fix tanks in Iraq, Jace. I can teach us again. If you take the lead, I'll follow. Jace fell silent, his gaze shifting from Ethan to Tommy, then to Lydia. He thought about Lily, about the call this morning, about her tearful voice asking why he was no longer a hero. He thought about the Iron Reapers, about the years of violence that were now just ashes in his hands. And then he nodded a slight but heavy nod. All right, he said, but if I do this, I want Lily to see that I'm not a failure. Lydia smiled, the first time that day. You'll see, she said, but not through words, rather through what he does. Tomorrow we begin. Jay sat down. The remaining Iron Reapers looked at him with a mix of doubt and hope. The road ahead was rough, but for the first time, Jace felt a small glimmer of light, not from his fists, but from what Lydia called the Eagle Ascent. The journey of redemption had begun, even though he didn't know where it would lead him. On the morning of the 4th day after the showdown at Liberty Diner, the VA Veteran Center in Quantico, Virginia was busier than ever. The early sunlight streamed to the large windows, illuminating the parking lot, which now held not just a few staff cars, but also a dozen shiny motorcycles. The last remnants of the Iron Reapers now carried a new significance. Inside the center, laughter mingled with the sound of clashing metal coming from a corner of the large room, where Lydia Harper stood among Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and a group of former Iron Reapers, all dressed in casual t-shirts instead of their familiar black leather jackets. Lydia held a wrench in her hand, her deep blue eyes scanning the group of more than a dozen people in front of her. Today is the first day of Eagle Ascent, she said, her voice low yet filled with strength. We're not just fixing cars. We're fixing ourselves and helping those in need. Who's ready? Jay stood at the front, his strong hands no longer gripping iron fists, but holding a screwdriver. He nodded, his gaze still a bit uncertain but brighter than yesterday. I'm ready, he said, his voice rough. But I'll warn you, Harper, I'm not good at being a nice guy. If I mess this up, don't blame me. Lydia smiled softly, unwavering. I don't expect you to be perfect right from the start, Jace. I've seen my teammates fall in Iraq, and I helped them get back up. You'll do the same when you fall. You get back up and learn from it. Let's get started. She led the group to a corner of the center, where an old motorcycle, a 1980 Harley-Davidson, stood waiting on a stand. This is the bike of a veteran from Fort Belvoir, she explained. He lost his mobility after Afghanistan, and his family wants to fix it up to sell, to help them make ends meet. We're doing this not to show off, but to let them know someone cares. Tommy stepped forward, his eyes lighting up as he looked at the car. I used to fix tanks in Iraq, he said, his voice steady. This is way easier. Jace, you hold the gas tank, and I'll take off the carburetor. He turned to the group, signaling. Ray, grab the toolbox. Ethan, you help me take off the front wheel. Jace looked at Tommy, a bit surprised by his confidence, but then nodded and got to work. Ethan, though small, moved quickly, his clumsy hands filled with determination. Ray, the guy with the greasy hair who had once doubted Lydia, mumbled something but still followed through, bringing the toolbox over. Within 30 minutes, the sounds of metal clashing, laughter, and even a few small arguments filled the air, but the atmosphere was no longer heavy. It was lively, like a small army finding its rhythm again. Lydia stood watching, arms crossed over her chest, a hint of pride in her eyes. She recalled the days in Iraq when she led the Force Recon team through impossible missions. Now, her squad wasn't armed with guns. They held wrenches, screwdrivers, and a fragile hope that they could become something better. But the real climax came when the center door swung open and a middle-aged woman walked in, holding the hand of a 12-year-old girl with shining blonde hair. Jace froze, the screwdriver in his hand clattering to the floor with a loud clang. Lily, he murmured, his voice trailing off. He stepped closer, his hands trembling slightly, his gaze locked onto his little girl. Lily, Jace called out loudly, his voice breaking. The little girl looked up, her blue eyes shining like her mother's, and then ran to hug him tightly. Dad! She shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom said you're doing something good here. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to see. Karen, Lily's mother, stood at the door, her gaze icy but unyielding. She insists on going, she said to Lydia, her tone stiff. I don't want her to, but she's been crying all morning. If he hurts her again, I won't forgive it. Lydia nodded, stepping closer to Jace and Lily. Jace isn't hurting her, she said. He's fixing a car to help a veteran family. It's the Eagle Ascent, and he's a part of it. Jace knelt down, holding Lily tightly, rare tears rolling down his scarred face. I'm sorry, Lily, he whispered. I didn't want you to see me like I was in that video. I'll do better for you. Lily nodded, wiping away her tears. I want you to be my hero again, she said, like when I was little. Jace looked up at Lydia, his gaze no longer filled with doubt, but with determination. Harper, he said, his voice steady, I'm staying. I'll do this Eagle Ascent with her. Not for me, but for Lily. Tommy stepped up and patted Jace on the shoulder. I'm staying too, he said. I got lost after Iraq, but fixing this truck reminds me of who I am. If you lead, I'll follow. Ray and the rest of the group exchanged glances. Then Ray spoke up, his voice hesitant. If Jace is in, I'll give a shot too. But I can't promise I'll be any good right away. Lydia smiled, her eyes lighting up. No one is great right away, Ray. But you guys are starting, and that's the most important thing. She turned to the group. Eagle Ascent isn't just about fixing cars. We're going to teach kids like Ethan, help veterans like Tommy, and protect the community like I used to do in Iraq. Anyone who wants to, stay. The whole group nodded, their chatter rising again. But this time was the sound of unity. Jay stood up, pulled Lily close, and looked at Lydia. I don't know if I can do this, he said, but I'll try for her. Lily laughed. wrapping her arms around her dad. "You can do it, Dad," she said, and her laughter was like a breeze that chased away the darkness in Jace's heart. Lydia looked around, feeling the pinnacle of this journey Eagle Ascent was no longer just an idea. It was a living entity, born from the ashes of the Iron Reapers. The climax had arrived, and she knew that from this point on, nothing would ever be the same. Late afternoon in Quantico, Virginia brought with it the chill of autumn, but the atmosphere around the VA Veterans Center felt unusually warm. The laughter and clinking sounds from a corner garage gradually faded as the sun set, leaving behind a pleasant stillness. The old Harley-Davidson, the first project of Eagle Ascent, was now disassembled, each part cleaned and neatly arranged on the table, ready to be reassembled tomorrow. Lydia Harper stood outside in the parking lot, arms crossed, her deep blue eyes watching the group that used to be the Iron Reapers as they packed up their tools, chatting with each other like old friends. Jay stood close to his car, with Lily right beside him, holding a small screwdriver that Tommy had given her, giggling as her dad taught her how to tighten a screw. "Like this, Dad?" Lily asked, her clear voice ringing out in the peaceful air. "Almost there," Jace replied, kneeling beside the little girl, his voice softer than ever. "But you need to twist a bit harder. Let me show you." He placed his hand over Lily's, guiding her, and a rare smile spread across his scarred face, a smile that no longer held aggression but the tenderness of a father. Tommy stepped closer to Lydia, wiping his hands on his grease-stained t-shirt, his eyes shining with satisfaction. "You see that, Harper?" he said, his voice deep but filled with emotion. "Jace has never smiled like this in the 10 years I've known him. You've done what no one else could pull him out of the darkness." Lydia turned to Tommy, a gentle smile on her face. "It's not just me, Tommy," she said. "It's Lily and you, too. You gave Jace someone to believe in, and you're leading this team today. Eagle Ascent belongs to all of us." Tommy nodded, looking out at the rest of the group. Ray and over a dozen other guys were now packing up the gear into boxes, with a few of them playfully teasing Ethan, the scrawny young man who was now much more confident. "I used to think I was out of chances after Iraq," Tommy said, "but fixing this truck, working with these guys, it makes me feel alive again." Lydia placed her hand on his shoulder, her voice steady. "You're still alive, Tommy, and you're helping others come back to life, like Jace, like Ethan. That's what Eagle Ascent is all about." From a distance, the bell at Liberty Diner rang, and Martha stepped out, holding a tray full of paper coffee cups. She walked straight to the parking lot, a bright smile on her face. "Hey, you heroes," she called out loudly. "You've been working all day. Take a break and grab some coffee. Consider it a gift from Liberty Diner to Eagle Ascent." Ethan ran over, grabbing a cup from Martha's hand, grinning from ear to ear. "Thank you, Martha. What do you think of our progress? That car is almost finished." Martha patted him on the shoulder, looking around with proud gaze. "I see it all, kiddo. From a bunch of delinquents to a car repair crew, I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Lydia, you've worked some magic here." Lydia smiled softly as she took the coffee cup from Martha. "It's not magic, Martha," she said. "It's people. They want to change, and I just show them a way." Jay stepped forward, Lily holding his hand, his gaze on Lydia filled with rare respect. "Harper," he said, his voice deep, "I can't promise I'll be great right away. But today, with Lily here, I feel like I'm not a failure. I'll keep going for her." Lydia nodded, her eyes lighting up. "You don't have to be perfect right away, Jace. Just starting is enough. Tomorrow, we'll put the car back together, and I'll take you to Fort Belvoir to deliver it to that veteran's family. Lily can come along if you want." Lily jumped up, clapping her hands. "I want to go. I want to see Dad be a hero." Jace laughed loudly, for the first time in many years, and the sound echoed to the parking lot, chasing away the darkness that had surrounded him. "All right, kiddo," he said, ruffling her hair. "Dad will try." As the group gathered around Martha's coffee tray, the laughter and chatter grew louder. Lydia stepped back a little, gazing toward the horizon where the last light of day was fading. She thought about Iraq, about the days she protected her teammates, about the times she thought she couldn't go on. Now, she no longer held a gun, but she still protected not with violence, but with hope. Martha stepped over to her, handing her another cup of coffee. "You know, Lydia," she said, her voice warm. "Quantico has never been like this. Ever since the night you took down Jace, everything has changed, not just for him, but for the whole town. Eagle Ascent is the light rising from the ashes." Lydia took a sip of her coffee, a sense of peace washing over her. "I hope so, Martha," she said. "But this is just the beginning. There's still a lot to be done." And when she saw Jay smiling at Lily, Tommy directing the team, and Ethan running around with a bright smile, she knew that the journey of redemption wasn't just theirs, but also hers. Eagle Ascent had spread its wings, and the Quantico community, little by little, was changing for the better under her guidance. A month after the official launch of Eagle Ascent, Quantico, Virginia, had changed in ways no one could have anticipated. The small streets around the Marine Corps base were no longer just filled with the sounds of military engines. Now, laughter and the clanging of metal from the VA Veterans Center had become part of the rhythm of life here. The parking lot of the center was now packed with motorcycles, not those of the Iron Reapers, but of Eagle Ascent, a new group, made up of people who had once lost their way, now finding meaning through each bike they repaired. Lydia Harper stood in the corner of the auto repair shop, wrench in hand, her deep blue eyes watching the team at work. Jace, towering at 6'2", was showing Ethan how to take apart the carburetor of an old motorcycle, the third one they were fixing this week. Tommy, covered in engine oil, let out a hearty laugh as Ray, the guy with the greasy hair now neatly trimmed, dropped a bolt on the floor, accompanied by a humorous grumble. Nearby, Lily, a 12-year-old with shiny blonde hair, sat drawing an eagle emblem on a wooden board, mumbling something about making badges for Eagle Ascent. "Jace, tighten a little more," Lydia called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "If not, the gas tank will be loose, and we don't want to let the family in Norfolk down." Jace nodded, tightening the screw with determination, then turned to Ethan. "See that, kid? You got to be steady, just like Miss Lydia taught." He smiled softly, a smile that just a month ago no one would have thought he was capable of. Ethan grinned widely, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I've got it, Jace. Ms. Lydia said I can fix the car by myself next week." Lydia smiled and walked over to pat him on the shoulder. "You did great, Ethan. This bike is going to help a veteran in Norfolk get around, and that's something you should be proud of." She looked around, feeling the vibrancy in the air. Since Jace disbanded the Iron Reapers, Eagle Ascent had repaired 5 motorcycles, all delivered to families of veterans in Virginia. Those who once caused trouble were now becoming helpers, and Quantico was welcoming them with open arms. The doorbell rang, and Martha walked in, holding a tray of paper coffee cups like she did every day. "Hey, you bunch of mechanics," she called out cheerfully, her bright smile lighting up the room. "I brought coffee for you. You've been working all morning. Take a little break." Lily ran over and grabbed a cup from Martha's hand. "Thank you, Martha. Have you seen my board yet? This is the Eagle Ascent badge." She held up the board, which featured a drawing of an eagle soaring around a motorcycle, the simple lines bursting with life. Martha laughed heartily, ruffling Lily's hair. "That's beautiful, kiddo. You make me want to join Eagle Ascent right now." She turned to Lydia, her eyes sparkling. "Lydia, did you know? Liberty Diner is twice as busy since Eagle Ascent started. People come not just to eat. They want to hear stories about your group." Lydia took a sip of her coffee, her voice tinged with surprise. "Really, Martha? I didn't think it spread that fast." "Faster than you think," Martha replied, pulling her phone from her apron pocket. "Look at this year-old video, now has over 5 million views. Local news in Richmond and D.C. are talking about Eagle Ascent. They're calling it the miracle from Quantico." Lydia looked at the screen, seeing a headline that read, "From Gangster to Hero, Eagle Ascent Changes Virginia." She shook her head, forcing a smile. "I don't want a miracle, Martha. I just want to help people." But before Martha could respond, Tommy stepped forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Lydia, you need to see this," he said, his voice a bit rushed. "I just heard from a veteran at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He learned about Eagle Ascent through the news, and he wants us to fix a car for his family. He also asked if we could expand there. Lydia held the paper, quickly reading the handwritten lines. I was in Iraq like you. Eagle Ascent gave me hope. If you all come to Fort Bragg, I'll join. She looked up, her eyes showing a hint of surprise. Fort Bragg? That's over 200 miles from here. Jay stepped forward, wiping his hands on his shirt, his eyes lighting up. If they want, I'll go, he said. Lily wants me to be a hero, so I'll fix their car, just like I do here. Lydia nodded, but inside her, a mix of emotions surged. Eagle Ascent was growing faster than she had anticipated. From a small idea in Quantico, it spread to nearby towns like Stafford and Fredericksburg, and now it was reaching Fort Bragg. But as she looked at her team, Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and the others, she wondered if they were truly ready for this. Lydia, Ethan chimed in, his voice brimming with excitement. If Fort Bragg wants to, why don't we go even further? I've heard friends online talking about Eagle Ascent in Maryland, even Japan. They saw the videos and want to do what we're doing. Lydia turned to him, her eyes flickering with a hint of worry. Japan, she repeated. Ethan, we just started. I'm not sure if I can lead us that far. Martha placed her hand on her shoulder, her voice warm. Honey, can't you see? Eagle Ascent isn't just yours anymore. It belongs to Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and everyone who wants to make a change. You just need to lead the way, and they will follow. Lydia looked around, seeing the determined gaze of Jace, the fresh confidence of Tommy, and Ethan's bright smile. She took another sip of her coffee, feeling her unease slowly give way to a glimmer of hope. Eagle Ascent had taken root in Quantico, but that seed was spreading far beyond what she had ever imagined. And when the phone at the center rang out from a distance, signaling a new call from somewhere beyond Virginia, she knew that this journey was just beginning. The evening at the VA Veterans Center in Quantico, Virginia, carried a rare stillness after the bustling workday of Eagle Ascent. The fluorescent lights illuminated the large room, where motorcycles in various stages of repair were covered with tarps and tools were neatly arranged on the tables. Lydia Harper sat alone in her small office, holding a cup of cold coffee, her deep blue eyes fixed on a computer screen in front of her. On the screen was an email just received from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, with the subject line, Eagle Ascent, we want to join. But that wasn't the only thing keeping her restless. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls from all over, from Maryland to California, and now even from across the ocean. Lydia sighed, setting her coffee cup down on the table, her hand gently rubbing her temple. A month ago, Eagle Ascent was just a small idea away for Jace, Tommy, and the former Iron Reapers to make amends, for Ethan to find his courage again, and for her to continue her mission of protecting others in her own way. But now, it had grown far beyond Quantico. The original video from Liberty Diner now had over 10 million views, and the name Eagle Ascent was making headlines from Richmond to D.C., spreading across the entire country. She never expected the seed she planted to sprout so quickly, and the pressure from all this attention was weighing heavily on her shoulders. The office door swung open, and Tommy walked in, holding another piece of paper, his face tired yet lit up with excitement. Lydia, you have to see this, he said, his voice low but urgent. I just heard from a group over at Camp Pendleton, California, over 2,000 miles away. They're Marine Corps veterans who heard about Eagle Ascent through the news. They want to open a repair shop, just like ours. Lydia looked at the paper, quickly reading the lines. We saw you on TV. Eagle Ascent is what we need to help veterans here. Can you send someone? She looked up, her eyes showing a hint of confusion. Camp Pendleton? She repeated. Tommy, we just got started in Quantico. I don't know how to get there. Tommy sat down in the chair across from her, smiling gently. You don't need to know everything, Lydia. You've already proven yourself here. Jace, me, Ethan, we're all living proof. If they want, we can leave. Jace said he's ready to lead the team if you agree. Lydia nodded, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up, and a deep voice came through the line of man identify himself as Senator Daniel Coleman from Virginia. Ms. Harper, he said, his tone commanding. I've seen the news about Eagle Ascent. It's making quite a splash, not just in Virginia, but all across the country. I'd like to meet with you in D.C. next week to discuss taking this program to a national level. Lydia felt her heart racing, but she kept her voice steady. Senator Coleman, I'm truly honored, she said, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Eagle Ascent has just begun, and we're still learning how to do things right. Coleman chuckled softly on the phone. You're being too modest, Ms. Harper. I've seen what you've done with the Iron Reapers, turning them from thugs into heroes. The country needs that. I'll be sending someone to Quantico tomorrow to meet with you. Don't rush to decline, give it some thought. The call ended, leaving Lydia with a mix of pride and anxiety. She looked at Tommy, her gaze wavering. Senator Coleman wants to take Eagle Ascent National, she said, her voice dropping. They're coming here tomorrow. I don't know if I can lead it that far. Tommy raised an eyebrow, surprised. A country? Lydia, that's a huge opportunity. Don't you see? From Quantico to Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, it's all of America now. You can do this. But before Lydia could respond, Ethan burst in breathless, holding up his phone. Ms. Lydia, you have to see this, he shouted, his voice a mix of excitement and panic. I just saw online a group in Japan called the Rising Sun Riders. They made a video about Eagle Ascent. They want to meet you, and they said they'd fly to America if you agree. Lydia took the phone from Ethan's hand and looked at the screen. A group of people in leather jackets stood next to a motorcycle at a small workshop in Japan, speaking broken English. We are the Rising Sun Riders. Eagle Ascent inspired us to go from being a gang to helping others. Ms. Harper, we want to learn from you. The video had over 50,000 views in just a few hours. She put the phone down, feeling as if the whole world was closing in on her. Japan, she murmured. Tommy, Ethan, this is going beyond anything I ever imagined. I don't know if I can lead a whole country, let alone on an international scale. Tommy stood up and placed his hand on her shoulder. Lydia, you're not doing this alone, he said. Jace is leading the car repair team. I can teach skills. Ethan is connecting with the kids. You just need to give us direction like you did in Iraq. You used to lead a team through war. This is just a different battlefield. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining brightly. That's right, Ms. Lydia. If Japan wants to, why don't we give it a shot? I can help you respond to them. I'm pretty savvy with social media. Lydia looked at the two of them, then turned to the window where the moonlight was beginning to break through the sky over Quantico. The pressure from Senator Coleman, from Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, and now Japan weighed down on her like a heavy stone. She had led the Force Recon team through impossible missions before, but those were clear, concrete wars. This was an ambiguous, vast mission, and she wasn't sure she had what it took. But then she remembered Jace, who had once been her enemy, now holding her daughter with a gentle smile. She thought of Tommy, who found himself again through each car he fixed, and Ethan, the scared boy who now stood tall with newfound courage. Eagle Ascent wasn't just hers, it was theirs, and perhaps it belonged to the whole world. I'll think about it, she said, her voice low but resolute. Tomorrow, when Coleman's people arrive, we'll decide together. But if we do this, we do it together. Tommy and Ethan nodded, and as they left the office, Lydia glanced at the computer screen once more. An email from Fort Bragg, a video from Japan. The glow of Eagle Ascent was spreading, but that pressure was also a challenge she had to face. On Thursday morning at the VA Veterans Center in Quantico, Virginia, the atmosphere was more vibrant than ever. Sunlight streamed to the large windows, illuminating the Eagle Ascent team gathered around a long table in the conference room. Lydia Harper stood at the head of the table, holding a stack of papers from Fort Bragg and Camp Pendleton, her deep blue eyes shining with a mix of determination and anxiety. Beside her were Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and Lily, the pillars of Eagle Ascent, along with over a dozen other members, all silently waiting. Outside in the parking lot, a sleek black car belonging to Senator Daniel Coleman had just pulled up, bringing with it a group of sharply dressed individuals from D.C., signaling that the moment of significance had arrived. Lydia took a deep breath, her voice ringing clear in the tense atmosphere. Yesterday, I said we would decide together, she began. Senator Coleman wants to elevate Eagle Ascent to a national level. Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, and even a group in Japan, the Rising Sun Riders, want to get involved. I'm not sure I can lead this far, but I do know one thing. This isn't just my journey. It's ours. Jay stood up, his 6'2" frame towering the room, his gaze locked onto Lydia. "Harper, if you need me to go to Fort Bragg or Camp Pendleton, I'll go," he said, his voice rough but resolute. "Lily wants me to be the hero. I'll fix their trucks just like I do here. I can't promise I'll be great at talking to the big shots, but I'll get it done." Tommy nodded, wiping the remaining oil stain from his shirt. "Me too," he said. "I was in Iraq, fixing tanks under fire. A little distance doesn't scare me. If they want to learn, I'll teach them just like you taught us." Ethan burst in, his voice filled with excitement. "Ms. Lydia, I can respond to the team in Japan. They sent a video, I replied, and they said they would fly here if you want to meet. We can take this to the next level." Lydia looked around, the pressure from the previous night slowly fading as she saw the unity of the group. But the real climax came when the meeting room door swung open and Senator Daniel Coleman stepped in, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes. Following him were two assistants, each carrying thick briefcases. "Ms. Harper," Coleman said, his deep voice resonating, "I've heard about Eagle Ascent, from a small diner in Quantico to a movement sweeping across the nation. Your video has over 15 million views now, and the story of how you turn Iron Reapers into heroes is really capturing attention. I want to take it to a national level with government funding. Opening workshops in every state. What do you think?" Lydia looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Senator," she said, "I'm not doing this for the fame. I'm doing it for people like Jace, Tommy, and Ethan, those who need a way forward. If you want to expand, I'm on board. But with one condition. Eagle Ascent must stay true to its mission of helping veterans and protecting the community, not turn into a political machine." Coleman smiled and nodded. "I agree, and I've heard there's a group from Japan reaching out. If you want, I can connect with the U.S. bases overseas in Japan, Germany, and South Korea. Eagle Ascent can go beyond just the United States." Lydia felt her heart racing, but she turned to the group, her voice ringing out like a declaration. "What do you all think? Are we ready?" Jace laughed heartily, patting Tommy on the shoulder. "I'm ready. If Lily wants her dad to be a global hero, I'll do it." Lily jumped up, wrapped her arms around her dad, and beamed with joy. Tommy nodded, his eyes lighting up. "I'm going with you, Jace. From Iraq to Quantico, now it's the whole world. Why not?" Ethan raised his phone. "I'm going to text the Rising Sun Riders right now. Ms. Lydia, we can do this." The whole group clapped, laughter echoed, and Lydia felt the pinnacle of this journey. Eagle Ascent was no longer just a garage in Quantico. It had become a global movement, spreading from Virginia to Japan, rising from the ashes of the Iron Reapers to the soaring wings of eagles. Coleman stepped forward and shook her hand. "You're the trailblazer, Harper," he said. "I'll work with you to take it further." As the team dispersed, Lydia stepped out into the parking lot, gazing at the bright moon hanging in the Quantico sky. The pressure from the night before had transformed into motivation, and she knew she wasn't alone. Jace, Tommy, Ethan, Lily, they were her strength, just like the teammates she once had in Iraq. She took a sip of the cold coffee from Forgotten Cup, smiling softly. "The eagle has soared," she whispered, and in her heart, the mission Protect was no longer confined by borders. 2 months after Eagle Ascent spread its wings from Quantico, Virginia, this small town had become a beacon of hope, not just in America, but around the world. The VA Veterans Center was now the heart of a growing movement, with new repair shops opening up at Fort Bragg, Camp Pendleton, and even a group of Rising Sun riders from Japan preparing to fly in to learn. Lydia Harper stood outside the center's parking lot, the late afternoon sun shining on her denim jacket, the tiny Purple Heart badge glinting like a reminder of the journey she had traveled. Inside the workshop, the laughter of Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and the Eagle Ascent crew echoed, blending with the metallic sounds as they put the finishing touches on another motorcycle to deliver to a veteran's family in Norfolk. Lydia took a sip of the coffee from the paper cup Martha brought this morning, a sense of peace washing over her. Jace was now a steady leader, teaching Lily and Ethan how to fix cars with the gentle smile she once thought he'd never have. Tommy had become the technical brain, guiding the team with his experience from Iraq, and Ethan, the scrawny kid who used to fear the Iron Reapers, was now the bridge to the younger groups on social media, spreading the story of Eagle Ascent everywhere. But as she looked out at Main Street, a wave of unease swept over her, like a cold breeze on a warm, sunny day. The roar of motorcycle engines in the distance interrupted her thoughts. It wasn't a familiar sound of the Eagle Ascent. It was more aggressive, more chaotic. Lydia set her coffee cup down, her sharp gaze fixed on the road. From the south, about 10 motorcycles emerged, kicking up dust in the bright sunlight. The emblem on their leather jackets wasn't the eagle of the Eagle Ascent, but a growling wolf. The mark of the Iron Wolves, a notorious gang from Richmond, over 100 miles away from Quantico, who had once been rivals of the Iron Reapers before Jace disbanded the group. Jace stepped out of the workshop, wiping his hands on his shirt, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the emblem. Iron Wolves, he muttered, his voice dropping. Damn it, I know these guys. They're not here to say hello. Lydia turned to him, her voice calm but alert. What do they want, Jace? Do you know them? Jace nodded, a hint of worry in his eyes. I've had a few run-ins when I was leading the Iron Reapers. These guys are way more aggressive than we used to be. They prefer fighting over talking. If they come here, it's because of the video with you and Eagle Ascent. They don't like us changing things up. Tommy and Ethan appear behind Jace, and the Eagle Ascent group gradually gathered in the parking lot as the Iron Wolves stopped about 50 yards from the center. The leader, a tall guy with long black hair and a skull ring on his finger, stepped out of the vehicle. His gaze locked onto Lydia. Are you Lydia Harper? He called out loudly, his voice deep and challenging. I'm Kane, the leader of the Iron Wolves. I've heard you turned the Iron Reapers into a bunch of obedient mechanics. Now everyone in Richmond knows about Eagle Ascent, and we don't like that. Lydia stepped forward, her hands relaxed but ready, her gaze unwavering. Kane, she said, her voice clear. Eagle Ascent is not a threat to you. We fix cars, help veterans, and protect the community. We're not in competition with the Iron Wolves. Kane scoffed, stepping closer, just 10 feet away from her. No competition? You turned Jace into a joke, and now the whole world thinks we should be begging you? Last night, one of our warehouses in Richmond got vandalized. Someone wrote Eagle Ascent on the wall. You think we're just going to let that slide? Jace stepped up, standing next to Lydia, his gaze intense. Kane, we didn't do that, he shouted. I used to think strength was all about bullying, but Eagle Ascent is different. If you want to fight, I'll fight, but I don't want Lily to see me fall again. Kane looked at Jace, his eyes filled with surprise. Lily, your little girl? I heard you turned into a softy now, Jace. But we're not here to chat. We're here to warn you. If Eagle Ascent spreads to Richmond, we're going to tear it all down. Ethan stepped in, his voice trembling but filled with determination. We're not here to tear down your workshop. Eagle Ascent is meant to help people like me, like Jace. You don't have to be afraid of us. Kane laughed loudly, but the sound was cold. Afraid? We're not afraid, kid. But we're not going to let Quantico teach us how to live. He turned back to the group, signaling. Let's go, brothers. But remember this, Harper will be back. The Iron Wolves got into their vehicles, the engines roaring as they drove away, leaving behind dust and a heavy tension in the air. Lydia watched them go, her hands clenched into fists. They're not just giving a warning, she said, her voice dropping. They're going to do something. I can feel it. Jace turned to her, his eyes filled with worry. Kane isn't joking, Lydia. If they take down Eagle Ascent, everything we built will come crashing down. I don't want Lily to see me fail again. Tommy placed his hand on Jace's shoulder, his voice steady. We won't let them win. But what do we do now, Lydia? Fight back. Lydia sat in silence, gazing out at the now quiet road. She remembered Iraq, the time she faced stronger enemies, but victory wasn't achieved with guns. It was won through strategy. No, she finally said. We won't fight. We'll show Kane that true strength isn't about destruction, but about building. But I need time to think. The group looked at her, their eyes filled with a mix of worry and hope. The darkness from Richmond had arrived, and Lydia knew that this challenge was not just about protecting Eagle Ascent, but about proving that enemies could become allies, just like Jace once did. As night fell over Quantico, Virginia, it brought with it the biting chill of autumn. Inside the VA Veteran Center, Fluorescent lights illuminated a small meeting room where Lydia Harper stood before the Eagle Ascent group, clutching a whiteboard filled with hasty notes. Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and more than a dozen other members sat around the table, their gazes flickering between anxiety and determination. Kane's warning and the threat of the Iron Wolves from Richmond hung in the air like a dark cloud, threatening to sweep away everything they had built. But Lydia refused to let fear take control. She had faced fiercer enemies in Iraq, and she knew that true strength didn't lie in a fist. "We can't fight the Iron Wolves," Lydia said, her voice low but sharp, slicing through the silence. "Kane wants to take down Eagle Ascent because he sees us as a threat. But I've seen this before with Jace with the Iron Reapers. If we retaliate, we lose. Instead, we'll show him what he least expects." Jace raised an eyebrow, tapping lightly on the table. "What do you see, Harper?" he asked, his voice rough. "We're not saints. Kane isn't here to chat. He wants to break things. If we don't fight, how are we supposed to hold on to Eagle Ascent?" Lydia looked him straight in the eye, her deep blue gaze shining with confidence. "We keep it by doing what we do best, building," she said. "Kane mentioned that one of their shops in Richmond was wrecked, right? I don't believe that's a coincidence. If we figure out who did it and fix that shop instead of letting them blame us, he'll have to think twice." Tommy stood up, his eyes lighting up. "You mean go to Richmond?" he asked. "To fix the Iron Wolves workshop?" "Lydia, they'll think we're crazy or weak." "Maybe," Lydia replied, a slight smile on her face. "But I learned at Force Recon, when the enemy expects you to strike, do the opposite. We won't go there with knives or sticks, but with tools for fixing cars. If Kane wants a war, he won't know how to fight when we don't retaliate." Ethan raised his hand, his voice filled with excitement. "I can help. I've messaged a few people online, and they say the Iron Wolves aren't as strong as they used to be. If we do this, I'll record a video to show the whole world that Eagle Ascent isn't afraid." Jay shook his head, but there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "You're really crazy, Harper," he said. "But if you lead, I'll follow. Lily doesn't want me fighting anymore, so I'll give your way a shot." The decision was made, and the next morning, the Eagle Ascent team Lydia, Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and 5 other members set off for Richmond, over 100 miles away from Quantico. They brought along tools for car repairs, a small truck loaded with materials, and a plan that everyone knew was risky. When they arrived at an old industrial area on the outskirts of Richmond, they spotted the Iron Wolves workshop, a dilapidated warehouse with crumbling brick walls, and the words Eagle Ascent scrawled in red paint on the door. Kane and the Iron Wolves were there, more than 15 guys lined up, holding sticks and knives, their eyes filled with hostility. Kane stepped forward, his face flushed with anger when he saw Lydia. "What are you doing here, Harper?" he shouted. "You want to show off? We're going to smash you right now." Lydia raised her hand, her voice calm yet resonant. "We didn't come to fight, Kane," she said. "We came to fix your workshop. Someone messed it up and blamed it on Eagle Ascent, but we didn't do it. We're here to prove that." Kane scoffed, but his eyes flickered. "Fix it? You think I believe that? What kind of trap is this?" Jay stepped up, hands empty, his gaze steady. "It's not a trap, Kane," he said. "I used to think fighting was all about strength, just like you, but Harper showed me a different way. If you let us fix this, you'll understand." The tension reached its peak as Kane tightened his grip on the bat, but then Tommy stepped forward, holding a wrench. "I've been to Iraq," he said. "I know it's easier to destroy than to build, but this workshop, we can make it better than before. Just let us try." Ethan turned on his phone, starting to record a video, his voice ringing out. "This is Eagle Ascent, not a fight, but a build. Iron Wolves, we are not enemies." Kane looked at him, a hint of surprise in his eyes, then turned back to Lydia. "You're really crazy," Kane said, but his tone was no longer aggressive. He looked at his followers, then dropped the stick to the ground. "Fine, fix it. But if this is a game, we won't let it slide." The Eagle Ascent team got to work, and over the next 6 hours, they repaired the walls, replaced the doors, and cleaned up the red paint. Kane watched, his gaze shifting from skepticism to curiosity. As the sun set, the Iron Wolves workshop looked brand new, and Ethan posted a video online titled Eagle Ascent Revamps the Iron Wolves Workshop, which quickly attracted thousands of views. Kane stepped up to Lydia. his voice dropping low. "Why did you do that?" he asked. "We're enemies." Lydia looked him straight in the eye. "Because true strength isn't about defeating your enemies, but about turning them into allies," she said. "I did with Jace, and I believe you can change too. Eagle Ascent is open to you, if you want it." Kane fell silent, then nodded slightly. "I'm not making any promises," he said, "but I'll think about it. You're different, Harper." He turned away, leading the Iron Wolves group out, but his gaze was no longer hostile. As the Eagle Ascent team returned to Quantico, Lydia sat in the truck, watching Ethan's video, which now had over 50,000 views. She smiled, feeling the tension melt away. "From enemies to allies," she whispered. Eagle Ascent hadn't just survived. It had proven its true strength, and she knew that from here on out, they could face any challenge that came their way. Early morning in Quantico, Virginia, was shrouded in a thin layer of fog, blurring the small streets around the Marine Corps base. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the mist, shining on the VA Veterans Center, where Eagle Ascent had become an integral part of the community 3 months after Lydia Harper stood up at Liberty Diner. Lydia stood outside the parking lot, holding a hot cup of coffee from Martha, the warmth from the cup spreading through her hands in the biting cold. Around her, the soft rumble of motorcycle engines started up, blending with the laughter of Jace, Tommy, Ethan, and the Eagle Ascent crew as they prepared to deliver a newly repaired vehicle to a family in Alexandria, 50 miles away. Lydia took a sip of her coffee, her deep blue eyes surveying the team with quiet satisfaction. Jace, now a devoted father, stood beside Lily, teaching her how to check the oil, the smile on his scarred face brighter than ever. Tommy, with his experience from Iraq, was guiding Ray and the team on how to secure the gear onto the truck, his voice deep but filled with confidence. Ethan, the lanky young man who once trembled before the Iron Reapers, was now running around with his phone, filming a video to post online. The latest clip about the workshop renovations to the Iron Wolves had surpassed 100,000 views, spreading the story of Eagle Ascent further than she ever imagined. Martha stepped out of Liberty Diner, just a few hundred yards from downtown, holding a tray of paper coffee cups like she did every day. "Hey, you guys working on cars?" she called out cheerfully, her smile beaming. "I brought coffee for you to enjoy before you head out to deliver those cars on time." She paused next to Lydia, her eyes lighting up as she looked at the group. "You know, Lydia," she said, her voice warm, "Quantico has never been like this before you arrived. Ever since that night you took down Jace, everything has changed now the whole world knows about Eagle Ascent." Lydia smiled softly, her voice gentle. "I'm not doing it alone, Martha. Jace, Tommy, Ethan, they're the heart of it. I'm just showing them the way, like I used to do in Iraq." But before Martha could respond, a sleek black car rolled into the parking lot. Senator Daniel Coleman stepped out, his silver hair glistening in the sunlight, his sharp yet friendly gaze scanning the area. He walked straight up to Lydia, shaking her hand with the strength of someone who had seen it all. "Ms. Harper," he said, his deep voice resonating. "I just got back from D.C. Eagle Ascent is now the hot topic, not just in the U.S. The Rising Sun Riders from Japan have arrived at the Yokosuka base, kicking off their workshop. Germany and South Korea won on this too. You've accomplished what no one expected." Lydia felt her heart racing, but she maintained her composure. "Senator," she said, "I just want to help a few people in Quantico. Now that it's spreading this far, I'm not sure I can keep up." Coleman laughed heartily and patted her on the shoulder. "You don't need to keep up, Harper. You started it. The workshop repair video for the Iron Wolves? Over 1 million views by now. People aren't just seeing you defeat the enemy. They're seeing you turn them into allies. That's your legacy." The tension in Lydia's heart reached its peak as she looked around at Jace holding Lily, Tommy laughing with the group, and Ethan holding up his phone with a bright smile. From a small act at Liberty Diner, she had sparked a timeless movement that not only changed Quantico but the entire world. But the emotional climax came when Lily ran over, holding the wooden sign she had painted last week, featuring an eagle spreading its wings around a motorcycle, now painted in vibrant colors. "Ms. Lydia," Lily shouted, holding up the sign. "I made this for Eagle Ascent. Dad said it will always be a symbol just like you, like him, like all of us." Lydia knelt down, holding the sign, tears briefly rolling down her cheeks, rare but genuine. "Lily," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "you make me so proud. This isn't just a symbol, it's our legacy." Jay stepped forward, wrapping his arm around Lily's shoulders, looking at Lydia with grateful eyes. "Harper," he said, "I don't know how to express it enough. From a punk, you've given me a family and now a whole world. Lily, this right here will stand the test of time." Tommy and Ethan moved closer. The whole group gathered around Lydia, while Coleman stepped back, smiling. "Ms. Harper," he said, "I will work with the government to spread Eagle Ascent everywhere, but it will always start right here, with you." As the group embraced, laughter filled the air, and Lydia felt the rhythm of her emotions settle into a deep sense of peace. She stood up, gazing at Lily's board, then looked out the horizon where the sunlight was slowly melting away the mist. From that moment, she stood up to Jace at Liberty Diner. She had sparked a revolution that not only eased the pain of veterans, not only turned enemies into allies, but also sowed hope for future generations. "Lydia," Martha said, placing her hand on her shoulder, "do you know? You're not just a warrior. You're the flame that lights up the whole world." Lydia smiled, her voice soft yet firm. "If I am the flame, then they are the wind, Jace, Tommy, Ethan, Lily. Eagle Ascent will transcend time because of them, not me." As the group climbed into the truck to head to Alexandria, Lydia paused and watched them go. She took a final sip of her coffee, feeling the mission from Iraq now blending with this new legacy. Eagle Ascent wasn't just a movement. It was proof that a small act of courage could change the world forever. Thank you for joining Legendary Narratives on this emotional journey of Lydia Harper and Eagle Ascent. From a courageous moment at Liberty Diner to a flame of hope spreading across the world. This story isn't just about fixing cars or defeating enemies. It's about the power of redemption, humanity, and the timeless legacy that anyone can help create. If you're moved by Jace's transformation, Lily's faith, or Lydia's indomitable spirit, please hit like and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next inspiring stories. We truly appreciate all of you who have helped Legendary Narratives spread the light. See you in the next video. Stay tough, stay proud, and see you soon.